show, not better.
Here's the problem with the city. Yes. Somebody's following through on it. So many places where we find it in Troy right now.
Let me call the Berkeley City Planning Commission to order for its regular meeting of Tuesday, June the 26th, 2016. Our chair is unable to be here this evening due to a family emergency, so I will oversee the show tonight. Would you all please rise for the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll say this, when we have an audience, we really get a strong pledge to the flag. Could I have a roll call, please?
Sir. Kapelansky?
Here.
Kempner?
Here.
Murad?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Shadle?
Here.
Smith? Tangari?
Here.
And Barnett.
Present. Now I entertain a motion to approve the agenda this evening.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Richardson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Shadle. Any discussions on the motion to approve the agenda? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote, please.
Kapelansky?
Yes.
Kempner?
Yes.
Murad?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Shadle?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Tangari?
Yes.
And Barnett.
Yes. Now I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the May 22nd, 2018 meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Murad. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Shadle. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote, please.
Kempner?
Yes.
Murad?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Shadle?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Tangari?
Yes.
Kapelansky?
Yes.
And Barnett.
Yes. Any communications?
As you see before you this evening, this is correspondence I've received relative to item number 4, the plan unit development.
Okay. Thank you. At this time, I will entertain citizens' comments. So any citizen who would care to address the Planning Commission on any topic not on our agenda, if you would step up to the microphone, state your name and city of residence, you may have the floor.
Good evening, Kurt Height, Berkeley. I just wanted to comment on, I guess apparently for a possible future road diet of Coolidge, they had done a traffic study. It was a Transportation Improvement Association back on January 25th. And while the subject was for, was just for possible road diet, it wasn't having to do with the PUD. They had counted cars 11 in Coolidge and 12 in Coolidge, but they had also counted cars at Harvard and Coolidge. And I found it interesting that during the peak hour between 7 and 8, they counted 149 cars traveling westbound and 67 cars going eastbound at Harvard and Coolidge intersection. This is an award-winning organization, the TIA, and they conducted a professional count that ended up being the exact same number of cars that I had actually counted a month earlier. So the Berkeley education does pay off. It should be noted that when you compare the TIA count done and my count versus the study done by Giffords and Webster in August, they both showed that traffic at Harvard and Coolidge was going to be 270% higher, 17% higher than the cars traveling westbound, and 52% higher than the cars traveling eastbound than Giffords and Webster had predicted there would be during peak AM hours on the school day. Hopefully you'll have a chance to get a look at that traffic study.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, hearing no one else running up to the microphone, oops.
Hi, Wendy Zabramski, Berkeley. In addition to Kurt's comment about the traffic study, Kurt and Matt had discussion earlier about the coming of that traffic report, and Matt had told Kurt that that was received mid-May. Why it wasn't released and put in the updated amounts into the La Salette is not known. However, I did go Friday to City Hall, and Matt was not in. I'm sorry, I'm not using last names. You guys know who. And I talked to Tim, and he knew nothing about a traffic study, and said he would look into it, and emailed me and said, no, this is the Transportation Improvement Association's traffic study, and said it had to do with Coolidge and 11 Mile. But clearly in the report, and I'm sure others knew, that there was Harvard on there. So I just find that a little frustrating that we're asking for transparency and we're not getting it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Vivian Carmody from the DDA. Just to clarify, the DDA, so Huntington Woods, Oak Park, and the DDA requested a traffic study from TIA to look at traffic counts from 696 North. We have a draft plan back. We don't have a final analysis back yet, or we would have released it. So I don't know where anybody's seeing numbers, but there's no final plan that's been released. It's waiting on Matt to okay it. It'll go back to TIA, and then it'll come out, and then we will publish it. So just to clarify, the TIA report that we're doing with Huntington Woods, Oak Park, to look at Coolidge from 696 North to 12 Mile is still in draft format.
Thank you.
Wendy Zabramski again. I'd like to clarify that I do have that study, and nowhere in here does it say draft. It clearly is a finished product.
Thank you. Anyone else care to address the Planning Commission? All right, I will close that portion of the meeting.
Mr. Chair, if I can just offer a brief comment.
Sure.
The traffic study that was done by TIA is in draft form. The traffic counts on Friday, Ms. Zabramski did come to City Hall, and I got in contact with City Manager Baumgarten, and he authorized me to release the traffic counts, not the rest of the report itself. The report has been made available to City Council members.
Okay.
But yeah, just to reiterate, that is only a draft. It's not a final document at this point.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to item number 1. Do you want to address item number 1?
Yes, based on previous discussions on amendments to the 11 Mile District, I've come back with some final revisions based on feedback and responses received from the Planning Commission. You can see in the document in front of you the changes in red, and there were a few items added in green specifically related to prohibition of outdoor loudspeakers or public address systems for outdoor auto showrooms, as well as a minimum building size of 400 square feet for offices for that type of use. And these, also just to add, City Attorney Starron did review the final revisions and saw no issue with that.
So at this point, I'm going to open a public hearing for anyone who would care to comment on this ordinance amendment. You please step up to the microphone and state your name and city of residence, and you may address the planning commission. Is there anyone who would care to address us on this issue? There's nobody's rushing to the microphone. I'll close the public hearing. What is the desire of the planning commission at this stage of the game? Mr. Tangari.
I would make a motion to recommend adoption of the amendments as presented to the city council.
Is there a second to the motion? Support. Supported by Commissioner Richardson. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, this is a recommendation to council. And council will formally approve it. Hearing none, let's have a vote, roll call vote.
Murad,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Shadle,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Tangari,
Yes.
Kapelensky,
Yes.
Kempner,
Yes.
and Barnett.
Yes. So this will be, I don't know whether it'll be on the July meeting or not.
City Council meets once in July. That'll be July 16. We should be able to have that on the agenda. I'll just have to clarify. I don't believe we have to hold a public hearing at council level.
No, you
But-
don't.
So otherwise, yes, this will appear on the July 16 agenda.
Okay, fine, thank you. Okay. I guess we moved to item 3. This is a public hearing on the Berkley Coolidge LLC regarding the southwest corner of Oxford and Coolidge. Parcel ID is number 25-18431-015 through 25-18-431-017, and a portion of 25-431-022, and is seeking, this is the regarding considering of the plan unit development. So, the first order of business this evening is the public hearing. So, at this stage of the game, I will open the public hearing for those who want to care to make a comment. You may go first.
My name is Mike Kulka. I own PM Environmental, which is a company that I moved to Berkeley 10 years ago on 11 Mile Road. Myself and my neighbor who's in the back here repurposed an existing building and now combined probably employ 80 people. We use brownfield incentives and the support of Berkeley to accomplish this, and our firms and a number of people here will benefit and have benefited from our development 10 years ago, and these types of repurposings of this proposed development will be good for a lot of local employers and local employees. So I think this is a great plan. I fully support it. I know there's some contentious we'll hear about tonight, but I give it a thumbs up.
Thank you. Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Zoe McGrath. I live in Royal Oak, just north of 12 Mile. The reason I'm here is I'm a parishioner at La Salette and have been for 22 years and have seen what's happened in the city of Berkeley, because I do most of my business in Berkeley since I live so close. I am worried about a couple of things. I'm worried that the city of Berkeley is being a little short-sighted. Royal Oak is building more apartments, will gather more professional people into the city. They're building a whole new complex where the city offices are. There's a lot of good things going on there, and I think Berkeley needs to step up or you're going to lose more people. And I'm also afraid that if this doesn't go through, you're going to be looking at a boarded up building forever. So I think you really need to think about what's being proposed and to look at it as a benefit to the city of Berkeley. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Petrie, Berkeley. I just want to say, in no way is it the city's responsibility to make or break a church. That lies solely on the congregation and its leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles Terrell from Berkeley. According to my scorecard, it doesn't meet the criteria for a PUD. I vehemently disagree with the fact that the school would be boarded up forever. If this does not come to fruition, there will be another developer come along who will have learned from everything that's gone on and come up with a viable plan. The city's engineering firm, Hubble Roth Clark, they agree that the application is still incomplete. They recommend not approving. I ask you to do the same thing. If after all these years, months, cannot get an application complete and have it be correct in its final form, then why spend any more resources on hearings, meetings, anything else? I ask you to vote to deny tonight.
Thank you.
Kurt Height, Berkeley again. First, I want to say I'm not sure what plan the other gentleman was talking about, but there is no, as far as I know, there's no repurposing in the current proposal for this PUD. Second of all, Royal Oak is building a lot of apartments, but they're also having a lot of issues with parking. There's a lot of articles online talking about it, and it's only getting worse. Now, if this PUD is built, I would be very concerned about the traffic in that area. I talked about a traffic count earlier. Eastbound Harvard is going to see an increase of about 70 to 100 cars once the PUD was finished. And so you're going to talk about, you're going to have backups to the end of the blocks in both directions once during the peak AM hours. And it was already bad. Now it's going to be that much worse. I was disappointed that we were in such a rush before that to pass the original proposal, that we allowed a study prior to the school year, and many of you were unwilling to listen to the residents who had experience at this intersection to see how inaccurate the August study was. I feel that the 2017 study should be removed from the Berkeley City website because leaving it up is contributing to this sham being presented to the residents of Berkeley. We know that the shared parking agreement now is not a legal option at this time. The number of provided parking spots for both properties is going to be well below what is required by code. Others have noted in recent plans for the PUD that there are many inconsistencies in the actual types of apartments because many seem to have extra rooms with closets, so we believe the number of parking required is being understated by the developer. If the church does sell this property where most of their parking is located, they will be non-compliant with city code. I'd like to know that the church is going to be contacted and instructed to get their parking situated prior to any sale of the property. Approximately 250 spots are sitting on these parcels that are going to be sold. I have yet to see plans presented that would replace the number of spots. How is it handled if any other business in the city would try to sell their parking lot? Would they be allowed to continue to operate? The last thing I'd like to say is the building scale and size exceeds city code and does not meet the master plan vision to protect the neighborhood and the home values. The height is almost 50% higher than what is allowed on Coolidge and almost double what is allowed in a multifamily district. If the building was in the range of 85 units instead of 129, we would not have to be concerned with the parking, traffic, or any of the other issues. Since last year, many of the Planning Commission have acted like this property had to be developed in a way that far exceeded what was allowed by code. But we only need to look at the DDA design guidelines to see that this is not the case. That concept in their guidelines would fit this area and would meet almost all design element requirements of a PUD. All response to that concept has been very positive, and it goes to show that the majority of people against this PUD proposal are not against development. They just want to see responsible development. The proposal before us tonight is not responsible development. It is a PUDzilla. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patty Curtis, Berkeley. I just want to echo some of the points I was going to make or have already been made by Kurt Height. Bottom line, a PUD is supposed to provide community benefits beyond that which can be achieved through conventional zoning. This property could be zoned for multifamily apartments. Some of it, I understand, already may be, but it could easily be rezoned in a conventional manner or zoned properly without a planned unit development that I believe the developers are using to skirt our zoning codes to cram as many apartments in there as they possibly can. This project is too large. Have them come back with a whole new proposal that uses conventional zoning for a multifamily. As Kurt said, 80 apartments, less than 100, you might be able to get away with it and have enough parking. Also, the church is not a party to this PUD. And when the church sells off this property, I'm going to reiterate what Kurt said, they will no longer have not only enough parking for themselves by zoning, unless they do an extensive remodel and add parking, they will also have no parking to share. So any shared parking agreement makes this PUD a pie-in-the-sky wish on behalf of the developers. I'm hoping that you'll see the sense in this, that this project is simply too large for this property, and you vote to not recommend this to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Cox, Oxford and Berkeley. It's been a while since I've been here. Let me take you back to a meeting where all of you that sat up there some time ago, and every one of you agreed, you're putting too much into too little of space. It was unanimous several months back. What has changed? What has changed in between there and now? You've done all this study. This has been going on for 2 years, and we've been fighting for 2 years. You're not looking ahead as to what you're going to do with all these cars, with all these people. In and out, you only got Coolidge, Oxford, or Harvard. They got to go right or left. They can't go up. How are you going to do it? How many spaces do they need? How many rooms do you have? Times 2. Just off the top of my head, 250 cars, and everybody's going to work, coming home at the same time. Which way are they going to go? East or west on Harvard or Oxford? You haven't adjusted yet. The traffic studies you said you've done, I've seen no traffic studies on my street, nor Coolidge, and if I'm right, the traffic study you did is for 12 Mile Lane, Coolidge for 2015, right? It's not for Oxford and Coolidge and Harvard and Coolidge. Go out there tonight. You cannot make a left-hand turn off of that Coolidge. If you take a look at Wilshire, Catawba, Harvard, Kipling, every one of them streets have increased traffic flow. You think that's bad? Wait till Beaumont Hospital gets its stuff done. Take a look at it now of what's going on up there. And it's just all going to come south. It's going to get worse. I don't think the 2 years I've been standing up there, and this pains me, and I've said it before, I don't like it. Because I worked here for 35 years, and I love this city. But you don't have the best interests of the citizen in there. It's all about the developer. The developer. Too much and too little place. I think I'm going to say something that I don't want to. But how many of you up on that planning commission belong to the Los Angeles Church? I know what you're going to say, and already, right. This is not about the church. You cannot serve two masters. You are a public government entity. We have separation of powers in this country. You cannot serve two masters. People go through life not planning to fail. They fail to plan. And I don't think you're planning far enough ahead for this traffic and this parking and for the interest of the community, especially our community. What's going to happen, you put this in that parking lot, okay, we'll go over to Kipling and Wilshire, and well, we'll put a high rise in that parking lot. We see another parking lot, we'll put another one in. You just don't have our interest. I just don't feel like it. How is all of these cars going to get in and out? How? I got a lot to say, but I think I'm done. But there's another battleground to be fought.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am Kevin G. I am here with my wife Amanda. We're from Huntington Woods. That's where our home is, but we also are parishioners of Our Lady La Salette Parish, which we also consider an extension of our home. And we would like to voice our support for the proposed development of our parish's former school property. We believe that it is advantageous to our community to create a space that benefits Our Lady La Salette and Berkley, and furthers the goal of making the city a place where people want to be. I'm sure you would agree that, like us, individuals and organizations who own property envision it as our nest egg, that we hope to be able to convey for a valuable purpose. Similarly, that has to happen for Our Lady La Salette, like we expect for our property's personal use. Our personal property is what I'm talking about. At the present, the school building is deteriorating and has been sitting empty for well over 2 years now. And my ask is that for those opposed to the current plan, we welcome ideas from our neighbors that create a space that truly benefits everyone who want to live and visit our neighborhoods and attend Our Lady La Salette. It is our goal to find a solution that the community can support and looks forward to showcasing, like our unique shops, enjoyable restaurants, and valuable homes. We look forward to this change furthering the advancement of Our Lady La Salette and our thriving community that I want to add that it supports. And I think that everyone here does as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jim Phillips. I live in Berkeley. I think there's a number of issues that ought to be dealt with. I only want to talk about one right now, and that's parking. We were at the Atlanta airport a few weeks ago, and they're tearing down their parking structures. Not all of them, but they're reducing the amount of parking that's being used at the Atlanta airport. Why is that? People don't use cars as much anymore. I talked to somebody about it, and they said they're talking about doing the same thing in New York, both airports. They're talking about doing the same thing in a number of different places. We are in a different era. We don't need the kind of parking that we needed in the 1960s or even in the 1900s. In a very short time, who knows how long, we're going to be faced with a different way of transportation. My wife and I have 2 cars. We're giving one away. And when we both play golf on the same day, she's going to call Uber and get the car and get driven over to that. It'll be cheaper for us, and our friend needs a car and gets one. We are going to have, within who knows how long, self-driving cars. we're going to have situations where you can get a car, take you to work, it leaves, and go someplace else, take somebody else to work. And over time, the number of cars and the number of parking spaces that are going to be required is going to continually diminish. And aren't we going to look silly when we got this huge parking lot and only about 2/3 of it is being used? think we need to think about what century we're in as we plan for the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Carol Barton, live in Berkeley. I am very disappointed that this is still in this debate. I am ready to sell my house. If it is not decided soon, because that's what I wanted, to have an apartment. I'm a senior. There's very little offered to seniors as far as housing who no longer want to have to go up and down stairs, besides townhouses where now you have 3 flights of stairs. This was something I was hoping for. If this is not decided soon, I'm out of Berkeley. I'm done with this city. And I also want to mention, I live on Sunny Knoll. Does anybody talk about the traffic when the high school is going in the morning or at night? It's the same point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin McDade, I live in Oak Park. My family first settled in what is now Berkeley, both my father's parents and my mother's parents, in about 1920, before there was a city. We were founding members of Our Lady of La Salette Parish, a church to which I still belong. We built the parish. By the way, the parish helped build most of what is now Berkeley. A lot of people came to Berkeley because there was a Catholic church. All right, it's not this body's business to support the church. Leave it alone. Don't support the church. Support your own community. Development is a good thing. This project will serve the city just as La Salette has served the city all these years. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Bjork. I live in Berkeley. And it's interesting to talking about the traffic studies. I was just wondering what the traffic was like when the school was open. There's a huge parking lot there. I'm assuming the spaces were used. And the kids had to be driven to school. Maybe they walked. And there was, well as Sunday Mass. So when I look around at Berkeley, I see a lot of broken up streets. I see sidewalks that need to be repaired. And I see a lot of development down in Detroit. And are there developers waiting in line to develop this property? I don't know. I have no idea. I know if there's long delays in getting things done, they don't get done. I'm thinking of the old psychiatric hospital out in Northville or Novi that now has trees growing out of its roof. It's been abandoned for years. Maybe that won't happen here, but it could. So I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for sticking with this. Also Berkeley, Coolidge LLC. This is a business. There's no guarantee of payoff. They've put a lot of work in this last couple of years. I think they should work to continue to finish this. This is a good idea for Berkeley. Currently, the property isn't generating any tax revenue. And I'm sure with all those apartments, the city could use all that extra tax money to pay for repairing streets and sidewalks and so on. I don't think there's anything else here. And I like the new design. I think a lot of the issues that were addressed in the January meeting have been addressed. I'm sure there are still some open issues. The building has been moved forward towards Coolidge, less into the neighborhood, so the shadows now are more towards the street. And I think it's a great idea, and I welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Fred McDonald. I'm a 44-year resident of Berkeley, and we still live there. I'm 82 years old. I've been retired from my job for 19 years and currently have 2 grandchildren in the Berkeley public school system. I haven't come here very often in 44 years, but I'm here tonight to urge your support for this project, because I strongly believe it would be a welcome addition to our city and its over 15,000 residents, and would contribute to the overall common good of our city and its residents. Among other things, it would provide more taxes for the city, many more residents, and more business for our local merchants. Also, in the case of property taxes, it has long seemed to me that single-family homeowners in Berkeley have borne a disproportionate share of the property tax burden. Developments like this would help ease the tax burden for elderly and retired people like me, as well as other homeowners, by spreading the tax burden over a broader base, which would include any new developments like this. Further, as we all know, the size of the property tax burden is an important consideration for many voters in their decision-making process for new tax proposals. In summary, I believe the benefits of this project will contribute to the overall common good for not only our city, but also more than 15,000 residents, and would urge the members of the Planning Commission to support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Mark Meek. I am a member of Berkeley, and I live on Harvard. I don't count cars on my street. I just live there. I am a member of the parish, a very proud member. I've lived in this area for 54 years. I've grew up with some of the largest developers in the state of Michigan, and I understand the complexity that you're dealing with. And I support everybody in their decision, but what I want to remind everybody, I don't understand the details of what's going on here, but I think we're all aware of stagnation. And it serves nobody's purpose for that building to sit in the condition that it's in without a decision made with due process. This has been going on a very long time. So regardless of what the details are, I think this group, both the citizens, the parish, and the people here need to come together with something that's equitable in a fast position so this developer can develop this piece of property or not. It's time to make a decision. 2 years is a long time to have on the books. I ask the people here who are opposing this, if it took you 2 years to sell your home in the city of Berkeley, how would that sit with you? Well, it's all in proportion because people's money are on the table. It's time to make a decision regardless in either direction. So I stand for a decision. I hope it's in the right thing. I think developing the property is the best thing to do, and I think you're going to do the right thing.
Thank you.
Hi, Wendy Zabramski again. I have a couple comments. One lady mentioned, welcome ideas. We have continually asked that they look at a smaller, more like around 82, where the parking would not be an issue, and yet they have not come down one bit from that magical 129 or whatever it is. They will not come down. And again, that's been for the whole 18 months. We have asked for responsible building. It is not responsible the way it sits. Also, a gentleman mentioned that, he lives in Huntington Woods. Huntington Woods would not allow this in their city. They would not allow the building of houses on Rackham property. So why why he thinks that would help, I don't know. But again, over and over and over, it's been said that we are not here to save La Salette. We are separate, church and state. We are separate. And also that you cannot, talk about tax revenue, make that part of your consideration in deciding this development. And one more thing, if this property and building had been put on the open market, or should it be put on the open market, I'm sure we would have one developer after another ready to come in and make some responsible choices. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joshua Hunter. I'm a resident here in Berkeley. Mr. Chairman, I think the idea of a housing development on Coolidge is a great idea, even though the school would be demolished, but and it would definitely meet market needs. But since the PUD is deviating substantially from proven standard codes, the scale and character of the building should be appropriate and meet the objectives of the master plan. The building is still very extreme in scale and relies on an inappropriate shared parking agreement to fulfill parking needs for tenants, employees, and guests. The master plan says new multiple family development should be consistent with the suburban character of the city. The most recent master plan amendment adopted last year states any code changes should require that new buildings are of an appropriate scale and style so that they fit into the neighborhood. Appropriate outdoor space and parking should also be required. The building is over 35% taller than the Coolidge District regulations and nearly 3 times the height of the standard multifamily ordinance. With a building footprint of over 34,000 square feet, it rivals that of Oxford Towers with much less green space and smaller setbacks. It allows traffic to flow on Oxford and Harvard. There is, I don't see any public benefit to allowing ingress and egress onto the side streets now that the townhouses have been removed. While certainly an improvement from the previous plans, the building intensity is completely uncharacteristic for the area. Also, the applicant mentioned in the narrative report study, a study by MIT regarding how multifamily housing development does not impact single-family housing values. I believe they're referring to this study from 2005 by MIT's Center for Real Estate titled Effects of Mixed-Income Multifamily Rental Housing Developments on Single-Family Housing Values. What was interesting about the properties observed in this study is that they had densities ranging from 9 to 19 units per acre, and most were 4 stories or less. This PUD, however, is over 40 units per acre. If the PUD proposal were at all similar to the most dense property in this study, the PUD would only be a 60-unit apartment. I think it's clear that the size and intensity of this building is simply too massive for the site. Even a 100-unit, something under 100 units, could be acceptable for this area, which is still very dense at over 30 units per acre. The applicant has stated repeatedly that the scale and number of units are necessary to make the project financially viable. However, they have not presented any financials or comparable properties to support this assertion. Mr. Chairman, please request this information, and if we're proceeding with a recommendation to approve, I'm certain City Council will be very interested in this information before they make a decision. In regards to parking, it's extremely likely every tenant will possess a vehicle. The bus stop in front of the school is Route 740, which is an east-west route along 12-mile and loops around Coolidge and 11-mile. It does not go to Beaumont. The lack of public transit likely explains why the applicant needs much more than 192 on-site spaces and is seeking a shared parking agreement with the church. However, regardless of what the church says it needs, it does not have any spaces to share according to code. Even if the church reduces half its pews so it only needs around 170 spaces according to code, it's still completely inappropriate to use special use parking lots in the single-family district in order to subsidize the parking needs of a large apartment complex. If the applicant needs additional space for parking, they should acquire the properties and include them in the PUD. Council will be looking for information to justify the PUD deviations from proven standard code. The need for multiple family development is there, but the justification for deviations and the size of the building has not been explained by the applicant. If the applicant cannot provide any comparable examples or reduce the size of the project, I think denial should be recommended to council. Berkley should not be the experiment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for being tardy, Coach T-Ball. I've been a Berkley resident my entire life. I've been a member of the parish my entire life. When the school shut down in 2013, it broke my heart. Watching this play out over the last 2 years has made my skin crawl. I know that there are a lot of things that are up in the air, a lot of things that need to be ready before it gets set forth before council. And I know a lot of people over the last 22 months have become building experts. I never realized our city had so many people that had experts in code. But the bare bones truth of it is, if this does not go through in a timely manner, we've really gone past timely manner about 1.5 years ago, it's very likely that the church will suffer great financial loss. And this is a church that's been part of the community since 1924. So we're talking nearly a century. So if you are someone that is upset about the height of the building or the egress or other technical things that I'm not knowledgeable about, that's your concern. But my concern is the loss of revenue for something that's been part of our community for nearly a century. So if this is the meeting that is going to recommend it go towards council or not, I remind the Building Code Commission that's assembled here, as well as the people behind me, that our mayor was a former principal of La Salette. And a lot of people in this community, besides the people that are here and those that are watching behind in around Berkley and Huntington Woods, have a vested interest in this being a successful sale and a successful development. So whatever it needs to get done, please get it done. Thank you.
Can I get your name, sir?
Could I have your name, please?
Andy McAvoy, 3567 Cumberland.
Just.
I'll give you my social later. Okay.
No, I don't. No, we don't need all that. Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Chris Riley, Berkeley. This is a PUD application. There are 7 standards for approval. I just want you to all make sure that every one of those boxes gets checked before you approve this application. There are so many things wrong with it that it doesn't fit a PUD application. That is the bottom line. I'm not against any development on that property, just very reasonable to code buildings, retail, apartments. Those are all perfectly fine. I live right down the street. I don't like looking at a decrepit parking lot all day, but this high-rise building with the amount of cars and traffic it's going to create is unreasonable for the site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Annalise Petrus, I live on Franklin in Berkeley. The first home I lived in was the one I bought in Berkeley in 2006. Prior to that, I lived in apartments for 36 years. It became my passion to pursue architecture and make apartments better than what I grew up in. I've worked in architecture for 25 years. When I first started in my academic career, the dean of the architecture school said architecture's like a religion. You build buildings, and when you knock them down, you make something better than what was there. And so that became the gospel. To me, this building's not better. And it's not better for a lot of reasons. To me, the very first PUD requirement of it being a high design, I think that's something we really need to think about. That when you can't provide adequate parking, you can't provide adequate trash removal, you can't provide, even on the documents, the precise height, the precise amount of trees that you plan on cutting down. There's still significant missing details in these documents. So it cannot be approved as is. And furthermore, to go to high design, if you look at the floor plans, the apartment layouts, which their space shows how they will function. It shows floor plans of apartments that have bedrooms without windows. They have closets with windows. I really don't think that people who want to live in these apartments want to live like that. There are apartments where their bedrooms are all on Coolidge. I don't know what doctor or nurse wants to sleep facing the street. And this is a fundamental design. This is not high design. I really don't think they're even successful apartments. The thing is that we want a signature design and a signature site. Berkeley is going to give concessions for their master plan. They're going to eliminate a contiguous row of Coolidge businesses for this PUD to have extra height, extra size, lax on parking, lax on traffic. That in doing that, what are the things the PUD is offering the city? Is it offering quality apartments? Because these floor plans are really not quality. I don't know anybody's aunt or mother or senior who'd want to retire to these. Just simply misusing our perception in the presentation of their submittal. The thing is that the city outlined what its future land use wanted to be, and it used the missing middle as its model. And in that amendment, they have a diagram of what missing middle looks like. And you can see this middle is from a single home to a mid-rise, not above it. Not all multifamily is the same. Not all apartments are the same. There's good ones and bad ones. And the earmark of a good one just isn't here yet. There are good ones. It could be different. It could be better. This, excuse me. This is an award-winning MISHDA competition for the missing middle. It is a completely different scale. It incorporates maintaining a Main Street feel, a pedestrian feel. Berkeley had a DDA design guidelines, which was a year-long process. They had over 100 participants on several occasions. Norrie Winter, who prepared that DDA guidelines, said that nobody picked buildings over 3 stories. Let's take that historical year-long endeavor and use that as a clue that it really could be too big. What the DDA did also put in their appendix was actually something that would be within the buy right. They wouldn't have to come for a PUD. They could build this tomorrow. It wouldn't matter anything that any of us said. They could just do this. So, Dearborn, their city hall was renovated into artist lofts. And in it, this is what some of the living spaces turned out looking like. That's what the school could be. It could be different. It could be a wonderful space. I can only imagine how wonderful it would be that if you were a student of La Salette and you retired, you could be living in an apartment in the school you went to. I can only imagine what it's like if you were to live in a building with over 150 people. I mean, this room is about 70. Can you imagine if we lived in a building with twice the amount of people here? Well, you want a lot more space than what they're giving. These are not quality apartments. It's not a signature look. In fact, quite frankly, looks a lot like a Holiday Inn. Generic, what you see on the side of every highway. And unfortunately, this is only 4 stories. Excuse me. The last project I worked on was 3 acres, 185 apartments. Prior to that, I worked on an apartment building with 62 apartments, and prior to that, about 40. I know the complexities of apartments, and I think if you could really look through the PUD with a design focus, you'd see this really isn't missing middle. It quite frankly misses the mark.
Thank you.
My name is Nancy Stimmick, and I live in Berkeley. No one is trying to keep this land from being developed here. I haven't heard anybody say, no, leave the school there and let it rot. I think it's terrible that they're trying to guilt you, the church, into accepting this plan. No one says no plan. We just want a better plan. We want a smaller scale, one that fits in with what we're used to seeing. The city is going crazy with new builds, huge houses, killing their green space. They're killing the suburban look of our city. And we have a building department and inspectors who are turning a blind eye to ordinances that are crossed and codes that are broken. The residents, besides the people of the church, need support. Of course, everybody does, but to say that we're going to save the church and sacrifice the rest of the residents, because a lot of people in this meeting are from the church. I didn't understand that that was an issue here until I came here tonight. When I belong to a church and they need money, they do what they have to do too, but to say, well, it's time to get off the pot or do, make this thing happen and accept it because it's gone on so long, that's not the residents' issue. That is the developer's issue. I really encourage you not to take this plan in on such a huge scale. I think it will be an eyesore, and it will create a lot of problems for our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Becky Burek. I am a resident of Berkeley. I'm an old resident, and we moved away, and now we're back. And I am frankly confused. I'm also a member of La Salette Parish, that the church is a resident. I am a resident. This is not about the church. It's about vacant property. Vacant property for 2 years. That's, to me, is unacceptable and a little backwards. And if they're still talking about the same issues we had 2 years ago, there's still something wrong and a little backwards. It's not fair for the church, its members, the property owners, to wait for 2 years while you talk about the same things. In the meantime, I also agree I would like to see it redeveloped because I would like to see Berkeley improve in ways. When I moved here, I thought it would improve. A new community center, better roads, I could ride my bike and not crack my teeth. So, and the sidewalks as well. So I really would like somebody to explain to me why there's this huge conflict between, oh, this is terrible, and people presenting things as facts, mixed up with opinion, that it's really hard for me to understand really what's going on. My husband read all the materials. He did not come away with some of the conclusions that other people drew. So either, you know, we have to hire somebody to professionally go through this information, or I have to trust the information that people are giving, mixed facts and fiction and truths. So I'm just really confused, and I don't know if you are, but I really want to see it developed. I want my property value to be maintained. I don't want to see graffiti on some old building that's abandoned. I would like to see improvements.
Thank you.
Brad Hidalger, also a Berkeley resident. I might lose some respect from everyone in the room with this, but I want to offer, I guess, a bit of a balanced perspective. I'm not really in either camp on this tonight. I think there's some pros. Development is good. I'm a big fan of a lot of the development that we're seeing in Royal Oak and Ferndale and Midtown, and I wish we could capture some of that here in Berkeley. We've had a lot of fantastic home redevelopment in the neighborhoods, but what we're seeing on our main streets is stores move in, stores move out, maybe some cosmetic upgrades, not a significant amount of real, true redevelopment there. The reuse of brownfield property is fantastic. Another resident said something about this, and I want to echo that I feel strongly about the importance of the reuse of brownfield property and how it's a great way to encourage, and it's just good for the metro in general, and it's a great way to encourage people to live here, closer to where stuff is happening in Metro Detroit, rather than encouraging developers to further develop greenfields in Exurbiet Township, Livingston County or something. The redevelopment of urban and quasi-urban suburbs, it's the future, and we need to facilitate this and be part of it and not watch it happen in Royal Oak, Ferndale, Birmingham, and not here. There's just a lot of potential for brownfield redevelopment, and I want to see that happen. Stormwater I don't think has been mentioned yet. Currently, it's a big parking lot, so literally any development that happens here is going to be an improvement for the stormwater situation, as they'll need to detain water to Oakland County standards, and that's significant and still a top concern for many in the community, though it may be talked about less than it was 10 months ago. There's also some cons to this, though. I think, unlike the redevelopment we're seeing in Royal Oak, Ferndale, and Midtown, there's no actual mixed use on this property. It's more than a year later, and it's still just a big, boring apartment. That's it. There's really not anything more to it. They've even dropped the townhomes, which previously gave some sort of rough element of mixed use. Many redevelopment projects, both in the urban and quasi-urban areas, are very exciting and generally met with a lot of positivity from residents. Often mixed use and townhomes, and there's space for cafes and other things that the general public would consider a destination, but not here. It's still a big box of apartments, a big H of apartments now. The developer is defining mixed use as different sized apartments. Well, we see a lot of other elements in their plan that sort of follow this. The developer is shot for the minimum for obtaining approval under city ordinance in many ways, and have they achieved it? Maybe. I guess that's your call this evening. I'm a little disappointed that upon requesting a PUD and working on it for all this time, that they've not shot for a little more than minimum and made it clear that this is approvable. And in certain instances, they may have ended up short. I know many people in this room believe they have. My understanding is that there's some engineering concerns still with the stormwater detention that they proposed. If this ends up being approved, I really hope that this is approved with modifications, that they have to fix this. That's an important part of this. You know, this is kind of something I just wrote in here in the meeting, so it's sort of not flowing, but if I took 2 years to sell my home, I'd know I was doing something significantly wrong, and that I would need to modify what I was selling, modify the cost of it, change something about it. I don't know. If this is approved, please do so with the necessary modifications that I still think it needs, if only just the stormwater detention and many others that I'm sure many of you will identify this evening or have identified through your reviews. Don't make it about the church. Make this about the city. A church is not a resident. A church is a for-profit business, and helping a business profit on their real estate assets It's not really our concern. If this was Sunoco and Sunoco needed additional funds in order to develop a 6-story apartment or however that works, we wouldn't be like, oh, pulling at the heartstrings. Yes, our favorite gas station. That's, I don't know. Let's not make it about that. Let's make it about the city, not a private community that is nearby. Most redevelopment is a win, but a redevelopment that requests so much relaxation of code in order to shoot for minimums is, I mean, I guess this is where we have to trust our neighbors on the Planning Commission to use their best interpretation of these plans and make the right choice this evening. Thanks for letting me talk with you.
Thank you.
Good evening. This is John Cooper, 1117 Larkmore. I am a resident of Berkley. I'm coming here to voice my support for this approval. I think I'm going to echo what other people have said along the way. I don't know if anyone said this, but I find this interesting that here in Berkley we're very close to something where people wanted the perfect and nothing happened for 16 years, and that is Tiger Stadium. They closed down Tiger Stadium in 1999. And for years we heard about all the great things we could do with Tiger Stadium, this, that, the other thing. But the long and the short of it is there wasn't the money, there wasn't the economic wherewithal, it wasn't viable to do what maybe a lot of us would have hoped they would have done with this. And I've only been on the outside of this, but we've been at this for 2 years. And some people, changes were made because people wanted one thing, and now people are saying, well, we don't like that, and we want something else, and we don't want to develop, but we want the perfect thing. I mean, just to state the obvious, there's not going to be anything that everyone's going to like, and to state the other obvious, that something is going to change. This thing is going to change some way or the other. This property belongs to the bishop. And if it's not a parish, it's going to get sold. And who's to say that whatever we choose, it ends up here for whatever reason afterwards because the parish closes, it's going to be better than this. I don't think we're ever going to get a perfect solution. This keeps property viable. It seems to get tax base. We always need money. And thank you for letting me speak this evening.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Patty Wilson. I'm a 3-month resident of this town. I don't have any background in what's going on. I just live on Harvard, and I am not a church member, but I just find this very interesting from the other places that I've lived that this would have gone on for 2 years. I don't know why you would want a vacant building sitting on one of the main streets of your town in a representation of what this beautiful community is. That's why I moved here. So I do support the building of this because we don't know what the other alternative could be. I would be concerned that if you put something real, shops and that, wouldn't that be more traffic in and out versus certain times of the day? And this is going to affect me because I live on Harvard, but I just don't understand why you would not want to have development in your community.
Thank you.
Good evening, Linda Gable-Smith, Berkley resident, La Salette parish member. I just want to reiterate a few things that I want to remind our viewing people that just because people get up here and say things doesn't necessarily mean they're facts or true. Also, sometimes they're personal opinions and not something that's really true and out there. We all have different opinions. We all have different likes and dislikes. Scale and style are your own personal opinion. These big houses that they're building in these neighborhoods now, the big boxes as I call them, I'd be horrified if one went up next to my little bungalow. But this, bigger is what people want. They want those big houses because they're selling. This community needs this development to bring in new people who have no place to go in Berkley if they want just an apartment. There's not many options available. Also, the older people who are aging out of their homes have no real options. We're losing one of our wonderful parish members. Well, we actually already lost her. She moved to Farmington Hills, I believe it is, because she had nowhere to go in Berkley. She lived in a colonial that she could not make a downstairs bedroom. She could not refurbish it to make it work for her, so she left the community. Also, this is a real estate transaction. This is not the city of Berkeley bailing out La Salette. We want to sell this property. We don't need this property. It's sitting there vacant. We should do something new with it. I drove home down 11 Mile between Coolidge and Greenfield this evening on my way home from work. You know how many vacant properties there are sitting there on the north side of 11 Mile? People are not banging down the doors to make new development, to lease buildings. We don't need more retail or coffee shops or whatever. I think we have plenty, and I think to add that to this development is wrong. But I really think it needs to be made apartments, and we need to move forward with this and get it done and taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I guess we'll close the public hearing. And we'll move on to item number 4. And now I guess we'll turn to the Planning Commission. Don't everybody rush. Comments?
Are we going to hear from the developer
We're going to
first?
hear from the
You want to have the developer comment on this? All right.
Oh, he has made
The developer here? Assume they're here.
Good evening. My name is Keith Owen. I represent Berkley Coolidge LLC. I have with me here tonight Joe Nowitzki, the architect for the project, Jake Modesto, the civil engineer for the project, Brad and Steve Friedman, developers for the project. Mr. Chair, with your permission, we'd like to run a brief video to sort of give you some information on the project. It's using some of the same graphics we presented, but it's about 90 seconds long, and then we'd like to hit some bullet points about what has in fact changed with the project over the course of many months. If it's acceptable, we'd run the video.
Can we run the video?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Is the projector on?
I do.
I guess Terrabella just doesn't want to show his face.
It's firing up, Tim.
Yep.
It's firing up.
Officially, that's about right.
Can you see?
Thank you. You know, the order of these presentations changes all the time. Oftentimes, it's consultant presentation, engineering presentation, but given that we get to go first in this part, what I'd really like to do is talk a little bit about the highlights of this current project, and what's currently presented in the package that you have actually is the result of input from the Planning Commission, input from the community, input from the consultant who was retained by the city to review this project. And I'd like to just walk through a few highlights of that if I can. Can you go forward, Joe? Over time, the density of this project has actually changed significantly. In the January submittal, there were 8 townhouses and 134 apartments. The current proposal is for 129 units. The slide says 7 townhouses were removed. Actually, 8 were part of the presentation in January. 7 were on the sheet when we came back. And part of the discussion the last time we were before this commission, the input seemed to be that the support for townhouses as part of this project certainly had been reduced, and we have, as part of this proposal, deleted them. That's an approximately 10% reduction in density on the site. Go forward one. There are, in fact, 13 different apartment unit types as part of this plan, including a new loft-type option, which is incorporated into the 5th floor that you saw some images of in the video. And those options range from studio apartments to 3-bedroom units. That is a significant range of housing alternative. One of the significant things as part of the discussion that took place over the last couple of months was the notion of getting some activity at street level onto Coolidge at the 1st floor of this building in lieu of parking. There was a lot of discussion at the last meeting about the podium and should we keep the parking on the podium or delete the parking at the podium. There was sort of direction kind of both ways. The direction of the development and design team was that, in fact, the important piece of this was activating the Coolidge frontage at level 1 facing the street. And as you saw in the previous video, that was done with a wellness center for the residents and entertainment lounge, office, clubhouse kind of function on the other wing, so that at street front you are seeing activity in the building as opposed to seeing parking when you're up and down Coolidge. So a resident wellness center, graphic images of the kind of things that can happen. The size of the 2 spaces of these common areas are really quite significant, and we have lots of options for how they may be finally developed. Clubhouse kind of function, entertainment, recreation, kind of in the resident clubhouse space. Again, as that develops over time, certainly things could change there. Lots of discussion about traffic as part of this, both at tonight's meeting and in previous discussions. The current plan has eliminated the drive on Coolidge to the front entry to reduce any pedestrian vehicular traffic. Main entrance to the building actually flipped back to the backside. There is now only one entrance off of Oxford onto the parking for this facility. The westernmost drive was deleted when the townhouses were deleted. If you could go. And you can see this on the site plan that was also in your submittal package, the removal of the circular drive, which both reduced the potential for conflict and increased the amount of open area at the front of the building. The replacement of the townhouses eliminated the drive to the west end of the parking area and helped create a planting buffer along Oxford. Open space on the site has actually increased significantly with the 25-foot setback on Oxford, the additional planting area in the entrance off of Coolidge. And the percentage has gone up. The civil engineer tells me that that number is approaching 30%. I'll defer to his calculations for square footage on the site. Obviously, on any project of this type, the whole issue of scale and massing becomes a point of discussion. In addition to the fact that we activated the 2 first-floor areas facing onto Coolidge, The height of the building as you approach it from all 4 directions was reduced to 4 stories instead of 5. So the areas that you see there on the bumps where it says all 4 corners reduced to 4 stories. We also incorporated into the 5th floor the loft type unit that actually becomes part of the 5th floor units. If you could. Lots of discussion about parking. Obviously, prior to our attending this meeting, we received a letter with an interpretation that said the quote-unquote shared parking approach was not applicable, so that we would be limited to the 92 spaces that are identified on our plan. What you can see on this drawing is that the combined parking for the church plan, which has already seen action by the Planning Commission, and our plan combined gets you to 437 spaces. If the church requires 170, that puts us in excess of the 2-to-1 parking requirement. We recognize that, any action that you take regarding this project going forward to council is in conjunction with the changes that have been proposed to the church parking and previously acted on by the Planning Commission. We believe that we have met the standards for site plan approval. I think all of the 19-item checklists required have been submitted as part of our package. I believe that the civil engineering provided with our package is consistent with what's required by your ordinance. There are certainly issues that we think can and should be addressed during final engineering review, but as part of the PUD and site plan approval, the degree of civil engineering we've provided, I think, more than meets the standard of your ordinance. We believe that the proposed project is consistent with PUD requirements and meets the standards for that, and that has been described in our narrative, so I won't read that to you. And we also believe that the kind of housing we're proposing is consistent with the master plan and the 2017 amendment. You have plenty of drawings and information in front of you. You have consultant reports, engineering reports, staff reports. What I would offer at this point is our team is available to answer questions, follow up with any thoughts that you have, as opposed to running through a drawing-by-drawing presentation.
Okay. Thank you. I'll turn to the Planning Commission. I have a question for Mr. Novitsky. I have one question for you, and I'm going way back. How many units were in the school when we first looked at this? How many units were in the school itself?
Roughly 47.
47. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
You can start.
In the presentation you just gave, you said that there's 30% green space. When I was reading the narrative, that is when you include church property as well, right?
As a total, yes.
So what is it on just the PUD site?
Probably more. 21%.
It's 21%?
Yeah, 21.1%. If I may, the PUD is inclusive of the entirety.
No, that's right here. This is your PUD site.
This is half of the PUD.
This is your PUD site. I mean, that's what you have outlined on your first page, right?
We represented a PUD and was asked by the city to break it into 2 parts so it was manageable. It is one PUD with 2 halves. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Before we ask any more questions, I feel like I'm being kept warm on the counter of a Sparrow. Could we kill these lights, please, and turn the middle ones on? Like, they're really... Maybe it's just because I'm tired, but I'm real light sensitive.
Nope, turn them all on. Turn them
all the ceiling ones, but not these.
Those are needed
for the TV.
Flip that other one up.
Are they over there?
No, that has to stay on. But turn the other one, the other middle lights on.
Middle lights need to be
Please
on.
turn the middle
but
lights on.
I don't ever recall having these on before, and they're
Yep.
just
I think
blinding.
I'm noticing it more because the other ones are on.
The one switch.
Yeah, it'll be all right.
Maybe I'm just tired and light sensitive or something, but it's
Okay,
driving me
go
crazy.
ahead.
Okay. Did your question get answered, Ms.?
I did get the answer on the green space,
Captain.
yes.
All right. Mr. Martin Smith.
Okay, I'd like to start with a couple things, and I'll refrain, or with the others.
Defer.
Defer, thank you, that's the word. Regarding the TIA traffic report, we did receive this just yesterday, and, you know, I get the impression that some people in the audience think there's something we're hiding here. This was emailed to me by Councilman Dennis Hennon at 10 o'clock yesterday. I don't know if that was appropriate. That's up to his other council people to decide. But it says a draft version of the study. So we received this a day and a half ago. Did everybody get this?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. So that's how we got it, and it just came yesterday, and it was commissioned by the DDA, not us, not anybody else. It's a DDA report looking at a whole different project. And it's interesting that the numbers had some significance to them. I'd also like to go to page 11 on the conclusions. And I was curious, the final conclusion said, this is regarding 3 lanes versus 4 lanes on Coolidge, which is not part of this at all. But one of the conclusions was perform warrant analysis for possible removal of traffic signals at Wilshire and Harvard. Then it says low peak hour approach volumes. And I was curious about that. So I called TIA and talked to the author of this. He said he would recommend that that the city of Berkeley eventually study this, that the traffic at peak hours, morning and evening, and we're interested in the Harvard intersection. He said, considering removing the light, the intersections, the traffic are below the thresholds warranting a light. He doesn't know why they're there. Maybe there's an accident. Maybe it was part of, you know, staging traffic at 11 Mile or whatever. But it's interesting that, and I thank you for giving us this. But we had a discussion. He said, we don't think you even need a light at that intersection. So I'm just bringing that up, and I just want to clear up. There's nothing sinister about this. We were given it yesterday, so I just want to clear that up. Is he in HRC? Yep. Would you please?
Hi, Roland Alex with Hubble, Roth & Clark.
Thank you. I read through your report several times. In our office, we get a lot of these, and I don't want to call it boilerplate because that's kind of insulting, so I didn't say that. So, but a lot of these are very minor issues that can be picked up on the construction documents.
Correct.
Okay? There's a couple that pique my interest. One is alternate stormwater detention method, that the soils don't, the soils we have in Berkeley most likely, I know every time I've dug a hole in Berkeley it's clay, but the proposed stormwater detention system doesn't work in these kinds of soils? Could you elaborate a little bit?
It'd be difficult to say it doesn't work. We feel that it warrants additional conversations with the developer. Prior to us approving a final site plan review, we would like the opportunity to work with their engineer. It is a little bit different type of design than we're used to seeing, so we wanted to bring it to the commission and to the city's attention that it's something that we feel needs to be addressed before final site plan approval would be given.
Okay. Another one, I'm moving along here.
May I follow up on that while you find
Yes,
your, is it something that you would be looking for soil borings on or something like that that would help you understand what the soil conditions under the lot are, or?
We're pretty comfortable with the soil conditions throughout Berkeley. As Commissioner Smith mentioned, it's fairly uniform throughout the city.
Sure.
My understanding of their design is that they're proposing a gravel-type sublayer of open graded aggregate that would hold the water and then would slowly drain out through an outlet, and probably their engineer could describe it a little bit better. But that's a little bit different than what we would personally look for. We'd look for more, think about an upside down, half-round pipe that are installed in series. They're a lot easier to clean. We have some concerns about aggregate subgrade, and when you have fines in there, how they would clean that. So we just look for an opportunity to discuss that with their engineer at a later date.
Okay, so it's more a technical issue and less any uncertainty about what's actually there.
Yes.
Yeah, regardless, it'll be an asset to the community, the local community, because, you know, we'll absorb the, you know, the whole property's pretty much paved, and as we've talked before, it'll absorb the
Yeah, we're confident
stormwater
that
and, you know, and
through discussions and
Swallow it
maybe
out.
some modifications to their design, they will be detaining the 100-year storm, which currently, the current site doesn't detain any water. It directly outlets it into your storm system. So to one of the citizens' comments about wanting to make sure that detention is properly designed and maintained is obviously high on our list as well. And it wouldn't garner our approval without properly
Sure, but that is more of
protecting-
a construction document
Correct.
approval. Okay, thank you. Moving on, well, still stormwater. Number 9, it says provide detention calculations for the church detention system are labeled as provided for information only. Yes, I agree, they should be part of the proposed work. These calculations should be part of the proposed work. Whether or not they're built from them or the church's civil engineer, however that works. But you will be responsible, make sure that all works.
Correct. Yep. Mhm.
Actually, there's probably 3 detention basins, aren't there?
Well, if we consider
The ones to the south, too.
Yeah, the ones on the other side of
Yeah.
Harvard, then, correct.
Okay.
And again, we haven't reviewed the plans for that, the
Okay.
other parking lot.
Okay. So I guess in a lot of these things, you know, one that small and I have curiosity, the water main. Most projects we do like this require a separate water main for the fire suppression system and then the domestic. Now, we don't have a commercial kitchen in here or anything. Berkeley doesn't require separate water mains?
No, we feel that with an adequate looping system, an 8-inch loop system, that you can provide potable water and fire protection.
Okay. So, going through these, and I just touched on a couple of them, and there's a lot of stuff here. But taking all this to an account, and it was brought up earlier that you do not recommend approval of the proposed site plan at this time, is there anything in here that precludes this body in a planning situation, if we choose to do so, to move this project forward? Are these something that is there anything in here that we have to be concerned about, or are these really between you folks and the applicant's engineers?
It's a great question, and obviously, with a statement like we have in our review, that obviously is a huge red flag for the commission. We were asked to do a site plan review, not a planning commission review. So our review of these plans, the report that you have, is a higher level review than probably what is needed to garner the planning commission's approval. So the answer to your question is no, there's nothing in this report that we feel would preclude you from approving this, with the caveat that all of our comments were adequately addressed prior to final site plan approval.
Okay, thank you very much.
May I just ask one follow-up question?
Go ahead, Mr. Richardson.
Well, thank you for those answers. They comport with my understanding. But I just have one question. Is there anything about this site that would cause you to question whether, the Oakland County standards applicable to this project are problematic or inadequate, or
With
further
respect-
standards?
With respect to the sewer system, I would
Yes.
assume?
More stringent standards would be needed. Is there anything about this site that would cause you to raise questions like that?
Just previously discussed, their detention design, we have some concerns about, but we feel that that can be addressed going forward. And we feel the holding a 100-year storm meets the Oakland County standards, and providing 10-year storage in their pipe system would meet the county standards. So there's,
Well, my question is, those standards themselves are in your opinion, adequate
They are.
for the stormwater generated by this site?
their guidelines govern your community and other communities within Oakland County. So I can't comment on whether Oakland County standards could or could not be improved upon. Those are the standards that we judge. There are guidelines. They're our Bible.
But you don't have any reason to think that there's something about this site which would raise problems with a plan that conforms to those standards?
No, unless you're alluding to something that maybe I'm not reading into, but no.
No, I'm not alluding to anything. You're the one who's...
Right. No, I don't think there's any red flags. It's fairly cut and dry. The volume that you need is determined by your impervious area, your green space, and as long as they provide accurate and complete calculations, we don't feel they won't be able to meet the Oakland County standards.
Thank you.
I want one more.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you very much. Joe, you have a moment? What is the height elevation of the loft's floor line?
It's probably 6 inches less than the penthouse roof.
But what is that? I don't see it on here. I have 43 for the fifth floor. 43
It's on the
feet
very
high.
left edge of the elevations, Marty. If you have an elevation
It
sheet. in
says
front of you.
roof. You have a 9-foot, and then you have your 1-foot roof construction, and then a 4 inches.
There's 54 to the main cornice,
Mm-hmm.
and then 7 feet 8 inches above that for the top of the penthouse, top of the loft roof.
Okay, so with the 54.4, where does the floor line of the loft occur?
The floor line is technically a mezzanine, and it is at about 12 inches less than the roof edge itself.
So it's going to be about 53.4, something like that?
That's correct.
Okay, now, I take issue with your last comment about the mezzanine. I see this as a 6th floor. The pedestal building, as we know, we've discussed this before, allows 4 stories on top of 1. I see a 6-story building here. How are these lofts mezzanine? How are these lofts second floors mezzanine?
It's open floor to the floor below. It's completely open, not 30%.
Are they less than 30% or 1/3 of the floor below?
Of course it is.
Doesn't look like it from the floor plans, Joe. It does not. Absolutely not.
Marty,
Maximum.
that's a math problem, and we can provide that math for you.
Well, I'm looking at A10, it's at least 50%, and I'm looking at A11, it's at least 75%, 60%. And you know, the code says that it cannot be greater than 1/3 of the floor area of that room or space in which they are located. So I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned that this has a code issue.
Let's solve that one with a review. This is going to be outhoused, reviewed.
Well, this is a big deal because I'm thinking it's a 6-story building now, and you're telling me you're looking at it a 5-story building with a mezzanine. That's a big deal to me. And I ran this by ICC, and you know, they obviously don't have the plans, but
I think that's germane, Marty. You can't arbitrarily choose a discussion without the science behind it, and I'm willing to take that on.
okay. So go to your AA9, please.
Okay?
A10, left-hand side. It says lower at the top, but it's upper. Does that look like no more than 1/3 of the floor area of that square?
The
Looks like about 50%. A11 looks like it's about 2/3. And I don't mean to, you know, well, I do mean to make an issue, because this is a, looks like a small thing, but it's a big deal regarding the constructability of this building as far as a pedestal building.
Please.
Mr. Smith, if I might, we acknowledge on the development side the ordinance, the ICC requirement that you have about 1/3.
That's code,
Maximum
yes.
1/3, the code-related issue, and acknowledge that the plans have to meet that standard in order for this to be a 5-story building, and we'll adjust any plan dimensions accordingly.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm done for now. Thank you.
Who would like to go, Mr. Kerr?
I had a question about actually a different plan, but it's somewhat related. This parking lot south of Harvard that the Planning Commission looked at last year for the church, what's the status of that application? We moved it on to the city council, but...
City council has not taken action on the special use.
Okay, so a lot of the parking that's shown on here serving the church is not approved at present.
That is correct. Council has taken no action on the special use.
Okay. That's it for now. If somebody else wants to go, it's...
Yeah, thanks. I just want to follow up on that a little bit, Tim. So, if this were to move forward, how does the staff envision moving that forward? Would the special land use and the PUD go to council concurrent, with one dependent upon the approval of the other?
That would be my understanding, but I can have a confirmation on that for you.
Okay, and then a quick question then on the parking. So there's been a lot of parking numbers thrown around. So just to confirm, the site as it's the apartment site as it stands without the shared parking agreement has about 1.5 spaces per unit. Is that correct?
Yes, 140 in the parking lot plus 50 in the partial podium.
Okay, and the church parking, in order to be compatible with the current ordinance standards, they would have to remove pews, or are they compatible as it stands with the new parking area proposed?
It's my understanding that they would not be compliant.
Okay, so in order for this PUD to move forward and use any of that, in order for the church to sell this parking area and move forward, they would need to get their special land use and that new parking approved first before the PUD could move forward. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted some clarification.
If I could add something, my recollection of the council's decision on the church's zoning requests is that they did table them for the specific purpose of awaiting our action on the PUD, and it is their intent to consider both elements of the overall plan together. In other words, the very reason that they have not acted is to await action on the rest of the overall plan, if that helps.
If I might, that was our expectation, and the way the plans have been packaged to this point was to address things in that fashion. That's why a little bit of the discussion about information on church lot being provided, even though the calculations were provided for stormwater, the note was for information only, because it really relates to the special land use permit piece for the church. But our expectation is that both of the projects would go to council simultaneously on the assumption that we received approval here.
One question of clarification. The church is not party to the PUD agreement itself, though. Is that correct?
I think they are.
Excuse me. Excuse me. I think they are. I think the parking, let me clarify one thing. We're not sharing any parking places.
yep.
We have 2 to 1, no matter what, how many times you do the math, we meet the ordinance. With the cross easement agreement that's part of the REI that is concurrent with our plan. One hand washes the other, if you will. They can't do what they want to do unless we do what we do, and when it all works together, it works together. But one piece doesn't work standing alone, and that's the point here. I doubt, with all sincerity, they would go forward without this going through because it doesn't work. It has to work together.
Did you submit a newer cross easement agreement than what had been submitted about a year ago? Is there some new version of it? Okay, well, this one says, the use of shared parking easement shall be shared by the AOD and Berkley Coolidge and their respective lessees, invitees, and guests. Notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained herein, the parking spaces identified on Exhibit C as exclusive church parking are for the exclusive use and benefit of the AOD and its lessees. It clearly says that everything else is shared, that there's specific church parking, but it doesn't specify 84 just for Berkley Coolidge. It says everything else is shared between the church and you all.
I agree with that, unless you've amended it since we were provided with the copy that Ms. Kempner is referring to.
The approved plan shows the 84, and we're sharing egress, we're sharing surface, we're sharing access aisles, we're sharing curb cuts.
And parking.
We're sharing, but we're not sharing any parking spaces.
Well, that's not what our copy says.
We're saying we're not going to tow them away, and they're not going to tow us away. We have enough parking for both entities.
What approved plan are you talking about? You've said an approved plan.
The plan that was approved by this body.
For the parking lot?
For the
That
two
was just
parking
for,
lots.
yes, but that was a plan for the parking lot. It wasn't saying whether it was going to be a shared parking lot or who's was going to park where. It was just, can we build this parking lot? They were very, very specific to say, this is a church parking lot. It's being built for the church. That's how it was presented to us.
To be clear, the lot south of Harvard also was a special land use, and that was recommended for approval to the city council. That has not been approved by the city council, so only one of the 2 lots that was presented to this commission last year actually is approved, and that's the one that's on the church property, north of Harvard.
South of Harvard, I think. It's the one in the back of the convent.
Yeah.
It's the one in the back.
The south one is the special land use that hasn't been approved yet.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, my name is Michael McInerney. I'm here on behalf of the Archdiocese of Detroit and the parish, Our Lady of La Salette Parish. Number one, the agreement, the draft of the agreement that's been discussed most recently is the same draft that's been put in place, but it's a private agreement between 2 owners and designates certain spaces in the lot, which we refer to as the west lot, the lot immediately west of the church. Some spaces are designated for the parish, and some spaces are designated for the development, the apartment building. Number one. Number two, the number 170 spaces has been kicked around. The church needs 170 spaces about 3 days a year, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and Easter. That's its maximum use 3 days a year. The rest of the time, the use is much, much less of that. It'll probably be limited to the spaces in the first row or 2, whatever's designated for church-only use, and the spaces that are planned on Harvard, on the north side of Harvard. Number 3, the spaces on the south side of Harvard that have been approved by the Planning Commission and are pending at the City Council for exactly the reason that I think Ms. Kapelinski indicated. It's when this is approved, then they'll be treated at the same time. And number 4, the property on the north side of Harvard is one PUD. The church is not going anywhere. The development is going in. It's a PUD between both parties, all 3 parties. The diocese as the owner of the property, the development, and the city will be part of that PUD contract.
Doesn't that become a problem with our PUD ordinance?
That's the way it's been proposed all along, and it's never been an issue. We don't believe there are any issues.
Could I jump in for a second, Tim? So I think we're getting a little bit lost in the weeds. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is how I'm understanding what's before us this evening. The PUD is for the Berkley. The church issue is a separate issue. It's the opinion of the city attorney that shared parking between the church and the Berkley is potentially not an option at this point, and that's something that would have to be sorted out in the future. And the Berkley PUD is proposing 1.5 spaces per unit as a standalone development, not including any shared parking with the church. Can someone correct me if I'm saying something incorrectly?
So I think-
interpretation of the
And I
attorney.
think one of the big problems here is that the information that you have presented to us, right, we didn't make this packet, right? You all made the packet, clearly delineates the area of the PUD. This does not include the church, the shared parking of the church. I mean, there's a big red line around it that says, this is the area of the PUD.
We were instructed by this body to do that.
Well, right, but they instructed you that you had to separate it, you agreed, we separated it, so this is where we are, right?
I don't have any issue with them being two separate one is a site plan, one is a PUD. I have no issue with that. I think it makes sense. I just want to make sure when we're determining whether or not the Berkley has enough parking, that I'm understanding that as a standalone entity, it has 1.5 spaces per unit, regardless of what happens with the church parking. Is that correct?
Yes. Just in numbers count, that is correct.
Okay.
Our understanding is, in fact, however, that the 84 spaces have been approved by this body, have been recommended by this body, to council, and that both parcels would be looked at simultaneously, in which case we have an additional 84 spaces.
Yep, I understand that. I think the city attorney's kind of weighed in on it a little bit, and maybe that shared parking is a little bit in question as to whether or not that can move forward. But I'm comfortable with the 1.5 spaces per unit as it stands. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't less than that.
It is not.
Tim, if you can answer one thing. So, if, and it's a big if, because we have no way to force that those lots be built, right? So if this PUD is approved and those special uses are approved, we're not entering into a contract in those, right? So we have no way, if they decide tomorrow that they don't want to build those, we can't enforce that because they're not part of the PUD, as is clearly noted in here, which becomes part of our contract. But so they build them. Does the church now have enough parking to share?
It's my understanding that once some renovations are completed to the church that would reduce the amount of spaces they would need, they would.
So they would have to build the parking lots and then reduce pews in order to have enough to share.
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay.
So, since we're on the subject, in Tim's report to us, he shows us some comparisons of parking requirements in other communities, and one of those communities is Clawson, and they break, in our ordinance, it's 2 units no matter what kind of, or 2 cars per unit, period. It doesn't break it down by studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. And Clawson's requirements are, for a studio apartment, you need 1. For a 1 bedroom, you need 1.5. For a 2 bedroom, you need 2. For a 3 bedroom, you need 2. So using those numbers, which Clawson, to me, is a pretty comparable community to Berkley, with 129 units with the breakdown, there's 24 studios, 76 1 bedrooms, 27 2, and 2 3 bedrooms. That would be 196 spaces that are required. We're at 192, so then you add in our reduction of 2 for a bike rack, right? So now we're down to, so they're deficient, in my opinion, of 2 spaces.
I'm pretty sure that Clausen's actually is 3 for a 3+ bedroom.
No, not in our report. None of them had,
I know, but I think
Rochester does, but.
Rochester was the only one that had 3, yeah.
but when I looked at it the other day, I was like, oh, wait, no, that's 3 too. I'm just trying to double check.
The one
if I did.
interesting thing that I found here too is that Ferndale is 1.5 for everything, but that you have to include 13 guest spaces, which I thought was interesting.
With the Ferndale requirement, they require 1 guest space for each 10 units.
Okay.
So that's
So
how
that's
I
where the
arrived at
13,
the
okay.
13, yes.
All right, so again, and I think, I can't remember the last time we reviewed parking for multifamily in this community, but I thought, in reviewing these, I thought, Clausen's, to me, was most similar and reasonable to me. I mean, there's 2 3-bedroom apartments, that's just another 2 spaces. So even if we said it was, we were going to require 3. And again, we have to remember, this is a PUD. We can be flexible with our requirements.
That is correct.
We're entering into a contract with them.
Yep.
So, from that standpoint, I don't know, I question the full need for that shared parking, in my opinion.
So,
Mr. Merritt, if I might, we did not include, if you look at the site plan drawing, there are 6 spaces that are crosshatched at the end of the island. Those are intended to be short-term delivery drop-off spaces. We did not include that in the count. There are, in fact, an additional 6 spaces.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Richardson?
Okay, 2 things about, and I hadn't even wanted to say a word about parking tonight. We beat that to death. But in terms of the shared parking agreement, it doesn't fall into a limbo between what we approved for the church and what we're being asked to approve here. My understanding is if we do approve this application includes the shared parking agreement. And that agreement will have to be entered into in order to secure final approval of the PUD, along with all of the other requirements. So we do have a contractual lever over the shared parking arrangement because it's going to be part of the PUD. That's my understanding. I'll defer to the city attorney for any final word on it, but I think that's a logical playbook for how this goes. More generally speaking, I do not intend to consider the shared parking tonight because our attorney has advised us not to do that. Even without that shared parking, it's my view that we have adequate parking for this project. And I think it's reasonable, well, I get in trouble for saying this, but I think since the shared parking agreement is part of the PUD, we can assume that if the city council approves it, then those 84 spaces will be added. I've come to this conclusion a long time ago. The number of units really haven't changed very much. And I'm basing it on my own review of the literature as well as representations by the consultant that we hired. I think it's adequate parking. I don't see it's ideal, but I think it's adequate. And I just want to add one last thing to that, which is that I went to La Salette for the 5 o'clock Mass on Christmas Eve last year. I didn't go in on that occasion. Instead, I counted cars in the parking lot and on the street, adjacent street, and I counted them twice. This is at the most well-attended Mass of the year. There's 154 cars. On an average Sunday, it's going to be a third of that. There just isn't going to be, in my estimation, a huge problem with parking as a result of these plans. And That's my comment on that. And that's the last comment I'm making personally on parking.
One other thing I want to say about the parking is that it was 1.49, I believe. When you take in the 19 spaces for snow storage, you're now looking at about 1.34 per unit. And that's also, yeah, a question. How many employees do you assume will be working at one time?
4.
That's going to include your security, your housekeeping, your reception desks, your mailroom, your leasing agent? 4 people.
Will those people be on site during the day or at all hour? When, what are their hours? When are they going to be there?
Want to step up to the microphone, please? Thank you.
My name is Steve Friedman. I'm the developer. There will be 4 people total for the project. 2 people, the leasing agent will be there on a regular basis, daily basis. Someone else will be, a maintenance person will be hanging around as well on a daily basis, and then we will bring in or rotate from other properties as needed the other 2, which would basically be maintenance.
So
We're not hiring, we don't have any plans of hiring a security guard to
there's
patrol
no
the property.
24 security?
We're in Berkley.
No, but has been said many times throughout all these different renditions that there was going to be someone 24/7 to handle any problems, and that has been one of those recurring.
I mean, we're managing the properties. This is how we manage them. We are in an area we believe is an area that we don't have to hire security.
Okay.
Hopefully that's the case. But that's how we envision managing this property.
Okay, and then the reception desks, when you first walk in, and then there's one in the entertainment or recreation, whatever you're calling it, area, those won't be regularly staffed then?
Certain hours, the leasing agent won't be active all the time, particularly when the building is leased up. She'll have dual roles, or he'll have dual roles.
Mr. Chairman. Yep, I'll weigh in on parking, and then I'll maybe change the direction to traffic. That's just as fun to talk about. So parking, I too am of the opinion that we have adequate parking with what you're presenting. Would I like to see the shared parking go through and to have more so that they're absolutely certain is not an issue, absolutely. However, again, given all of the information that we've received, including the DDA and whatnot, I believe that it currently is adequate. And I do want to then talk a little bit about the traffic flow. I do think that the reduction in curb cuts are significantly going to reduce the traffic that comes out onto Harvard and does control that traffic in and out of the property. And I'm much more comfortable with this flow than what we've had in the past, including the curb cuts out on Coolidge, where it was very difficult to have even a safe walkway, in my opinion, straight across the property in that manner. So I'm happy with that reduction.
Anybody else on the planning commission?
Yeah,
Got
I do.
comments?
So
Mr.
on,
Chairman?
which sheet is it here? AS1, you show an elevation of the brick wall, the screen wall. And you show that it's going to be brick over the CMU. Is it going to be brick on both sides?
Brick
What's the
all the way,
cross-section?
this is not the screen wall, this is a dumpster wall.
Oh, that's the dumpster wall.
That's the
Okay.
dumpster wall, it's brick all the way around CMU on the inside.
Okay, so what about the screen wall?
The screen wall is masonry on the plan.
Okay.
And we're hoping actually that it's probably the precast panels, brick, simulated brick,
Okay,
dyed.
all right. Okay, thank you.
How big are those dumpsters?
Sorry?
How big are those dumpsters?
It's a standard dumpster. It's a 10 by 20 enclosure with 2 dumpsters in it. I think they're 4 or 5 yards, I'm not sure.
So your theory is that you're going to end up dumping them daily? So for an apartment this size, you should expect a weekly volume should be about 13 cubic yards of trash and about 13 cubic yards of recycling. So
We are certainly expecting from a management standpoint that the dumpsters will be addressed as required, whether, if that's daily, given the size. I believe that they're probably actually 7-yard dumpsters in each location for that condition, and there are 2 of them. So.
And is
they're
one going to
separate.
be for recycling and one for trash? Or are they both just trash, no recycling?
I think that's a management issue, and I can't imagine wanting to collect garbage in a greater capacity than we're showing.
Because
They can empty them as they need to, but to make a bigger collection just makes no sense to me.
well, you want to make sure that they're adequate, especially
Of
since
course they
that's
are.
right by your community
They can,
garden.
if they have to do
So
them
if
daily,
the public is going to be
if
using
they
them.
have to do them daily, they think they will.
Yes, but nobody's going to want to do that in 10 years from now. I mean, it's very easy to say right away that that's what we want to do. Financially, when we start looking, going, oh, do we need to have it every day? I've lived in many apartments in many different areas, and I have dealt with apartment buildings where, the apartment ends up going on the side, on the ground around the side of the dumpster.
As an
'cause the
owner,
dumpster's
as an
full.
owner of the real estate and having to maximize our value, we need to maintain the property so that our residents are happy and they're not concerned with those types of things. If we have to do it every day because for some reason this apartment building generates more trash than any other apartment building, we will have to pick it up every other day, every other day. You know, that's part of the management. We're not going to let stuff overflow. It impacts us more than it does the community.
And I'm sure everybody says that, right?
No.
So my
People that
point
own the
is
real estate,
to,
that are going to own the real estate and
try and
manage these
ensure-
things, have to do it a certain way, okay? And we're not going to forego our responsibilities just because we build a building, and we have to keep it full. We have to keep rents at a level that allow us to generate a profit to provide the services.
Absolutely.
So I don't understand the concern. I appreciate the concern, but we will make sure that we handle it appropriately.
On that note, do we have trash cans in the community garden and in the courtyard?
Again, we are going to plan the appropriate components to this overall plan. There are some details that need to be defined, but those will be handled and those will be presented to you. In fact, we would be happy to present them to you. Do we come back for a site plan review? No.
I think you're trying to ask for approval today, aren't you?
Okay, so if you want to give us a little consideration as it relates to some of those types of details, we're going to try to make this a very prestigious building that has all the components that are necessary so that people really want to live here, including trash.
Lighting in the community garden. Is there lighting in the community garden?
We've submitted a full complement of photometrics and
Right, and it
and
has nothing
fixtures.
in that.
Yes, it does. It has the pedestals, the pedals. I've got them with me if you want me to break it out. It's a blue sheet. They're pedestals. They're about 3 feet high, and it doesn't show up on the photometric because it's simply not registered. But yes, they're throughout the walk paths. They're on the plans, and we've submitted the fixture. It's a cylindrical fixture about 3 feet high. It's a durable commercial fixture. I've got it with me. You want to see it?
Sure.
I've submitted it. Okay.
I think one of the things about a PUD is it in essence becomes a contract. So what we have on paper in front of us, when we move it forward, when it goes to city council, that becomes part of the project. So if something isn't located on here, if it does not happen, then it becomes, well, he said, she said, it's not in the paper, so I didn't necessarily say I could do that, and it becomes a problem. That's why we try and nail this down. Are there garbage cans? Because there needs to be garbage cans. Could you possibly forget about them? Sure. Everybody's human. It seems, there's a lot of moving parts to this. So that's why I ask. That's why they should be on these site plans.
These illuminate the ground with the reflectors 3 feet high. This has been submitted probably 5 times.
And they would,
don't register on the photometric. They're such low lumens, they don't register on the photometric.
okay, and those would be just along, let me find
Through
them.
all the walkways. Through the walkways are in the common area on the south side of the building. The common areas along the walkways in the courtyard,
And do we have anything that shows where they're going to be?
I think these are indicators of that.
Those are community barbecues.
Okay, let me find our plans. I'll get my plan on hand. I'm sure we could.
I know.
It's on the last
Already is.
submittal that we did. We took out our,
I haven't either.
we took out our blow up for the courtyard because it's on the, it's on the landscape plan. He typically does not.
So I'm just thinking, this, for those of you who asked the question earlier, this is part of the reason that it's taken 2 years, because then we asked, because stuff appears and then it disappears and stuff changes and it doesn't make it to another one. So this is,
Can we stipulate at this point that we will add the bollard lights to the photometric plan?
It won't show
At your
up.
convenience. We can,
Working drawings.
we'll show the fixtures.
They should show up on the site plan somewhere.
Yep. We will add them to the plan.
We took it out of gravity. 60 something.
Well, they should be on the site plan somewhere, I would assume.
so then while I'm monopolizing the conversation, I'll go one more second. This is yet another submittal where your apartment analysis is sloppy. It doesn't match, it doesn't, the numbers don't match the amount of studios, and your parking analysis isn't correct. Things are labeled as 1 bedrooms when they're 2 bedrooms, et cetera. This has been a recurring problem, and again, it becomes a problem when we approve it, because then, well, what do we put up? Well, this page says this page says that. There's some handicap parking places that move around from page to page. Those should all be closest to the entrance. They shouldn't be on the other side of the courtyard. They're handicap spots. They should be right directly by the entrance. It's just, the work is sloppy. The work has been sloppy consistently, and that makes me very nervous as to what this translates into real life. Because this has been 2 years. You would think after, well, it hasn't actually been 2 years, but you think by this time it would be tightened up. You would know what should come in front of us, just have to tweak it a little bit. It keeps coming back sloppy and incomplete, and then it comes back to us, and you have to go back and tweak it again, and then we're here again, and we have to call them here again, and they're upset, and everybody's upset because this has taken so long.
Okay?
Yes, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on some of the comments in the report from Carlisle Whitman. Did you have a chance to look at that? There were some minor issues.
I have seen the report.
Oh, okay. So just to kind of go through them in bullet point, the connection to the connection walk on Oxford, any issue with including that?
No.
The buffer along the rear property line, I believe a fence and some more column-shaped evergreens were proposed. Any issue with that?
Frankly, we would prefer to do it with landscape, but if the stipulation is it needs to be a low wall with taller landscape, I think we can live with that approach. If the issue is we want to block headlights at that lower level, certainly I think we can do that.
Mr. Carlisle, could you weigh in on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, that was the main concern, just because...
Want to step up to the microphone?
Or use the mic.
He's got one right
Oh,
there.
has he got a microphone? He's got one right there. He got one. Sorry.
Yeah, that was the main concern, was just to, well, first of all, the idea that would be to provide a solid evergreen, or a solid screen, okay? And I think it's going to be more effective to do it a combination with a low wall, because that will screen headlights, and to soften that with some landscaping. So that was that's what the recommendation, and it's just along that rear property line.
Okay, so it sounds like you're not necessarily in favor of it, but you'd go along with it.
That's a fair characterization.
Okay, how about the landscape changes that were suggested along Oxford? Evergreens instead of deciduous plantings.
You know, again, Jim Scott, who's the landscape architect for this project, has been around for something approaching a million years. Well-known and highly regarded. I think we actually really like the plan, but in terms of modifying the plan to address screening concerns, we certainly can do that with the kind of planting that would work for everyone. I mean, our goal, obviously, when we made the change with the townhouses and extended the 25-foot buffer, was to create a real buffer visually. I think what we've done does that, certainly at a level well beyond how the parking is screened now or in any previous proposal. But we are certainly open to modifying plant material to address those concerns.
Okay, and then the last issue I think that was raised was the lighting. I assume the fixtures will be shielded.
Yes.
And then what's the pole height in that parking area?
20 feet, Joe? 20. Yeah. We actually forwarded the fixtures to to Mr. Carlisle afterwards. So the fixture data has been provided along with the photometrics.
Okay.
The fixture data is on the plans. It's put in. I wanted to see the actual detail of it, just to confirm what was shown on the plans, and it does confirm that it's 20 feet.
Okay, and Mr. Carlisle, in your experience, would a 15-foot pole be more appropriate instead of the 20-foot, being so close to residential, or do you feel like you wouldn't get adequate lighting levels with that height?
Well, the problem is that when you reduce the height of the poles, you have to add more poles to get an adequate amount of lighting. So, my opinion would be no.
Okay, that was it. I just wanted to run through those.
Okay. Anybody else?
A couple little things, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Smith?
Maybe not little things, I think they are. Could you add a wall detail for the screen wall along the west end of the property at the church parking? It says proposed 6-foot-high screen wall, refer to proposed church parking plans. Could you just add that detail, please, to the drawing?
Just as a question, Mr. Smith, would it be appropriate if we match the wall we just talked about for the west property line at our parking lot, so they are visually the same?
That's an approved site plan already, so.
It is.
Yep.
That's already approved as a 6.
Okay, we'll add a detail.
Please do. And what did we approve I don't remember, it's been a while. Did we approve is this a segmented precast wall?
It's described as a 6-foot masonry wall, and it has not been detailed.
Okay.
And that was to be determined at a later date and/or with the ordinance says 6-foot masonry. We agree.
Well,
And it wasn't even required there.
We asked for it, I understand, yeah. We don't want one of those things where they're slid in with the with the metal beams, metal H beams.
Yeah.
Masonry, not,
Real
precast.
masonry is what you want.
Real masonry,
Yes.
okay?
Got it.
Yeah, okay. Provide us the detail, just please. And then on the very southwest corner, and I know this keeps coming up, there's that little knob, the Far West Drive, which directs traffic to Coolidge. And I think it was Mr. Murad, someone spoke that, there are people coming from the west that want to park in the church parking lot. And we talked about that going away, and I still see it here. So I don't know if that's for the previous plan that's something these folks can address. But as we talked about this and things evolved, we talked about getting rid of that little knob that forces everybody to go east instead of west. So I'd like to see that removed also. Okay, elevations. Oh, I'm sorry, plan. Have you decided on the HVAC system for the dwelling units yet?
Yeah, pretty much. Chillers on the roof and heat pumps in each unit.
Some show a box and some don't, some of the units.
That's correct. We have to redo the bathrooms for ADA compliance.
Will there be a significant sized grill at each unit on the
No,
exterior?
no, not at all.
How big?
There will not be exterior
makeup air?
grills. No, from the roof, exhaust and pull.
No makeup air?
No. Exhaust and pull from the roof.
Mr. Smith, we did have a mechanical engineer evaluate a variety of systems prior to making a selection and decided that for a variety of reasons, operationally, aesthetically, to go with a heat pump approach, not a P-PAC with the grills through the wall. It obviously helps the building visually, helps some floor-to-floor height issues, and we have addressed that with a mechanical engineer prior to this submittal.
So there's no grills regarding the HVAC system, sorry, no grills at the HVAC system for each apartment?
That's correct.
Okay. Something that is not our business, but I'll bring it up. You may want one larger elevator for stretchers and things, just to, these are both little ones, but that's fine. It's not our business, just, you know. Is there any access to the roof other than what would be considered maintenance or staff?
No.
Well, at the end-
You mean for service or for?
For service, not, is there any residential access?
There is not intended at this point to be residential access to the roofs.
Excuse me while I write this down. Yeah, and some of the unit plants are missing their heat pump, but I'm sure that's all internal. We talked about the loft units, the loft unit plans. The building looks like it's 100% brick now. Real brick or thin brick?
Thin brick.
It's all thin brick?
Yes.
No EFS?
Nope. Wait, that's.
Mr. Chairman, we will continue to disagree. I'd rather have EFS than thin brick.
No, we're not
But that's fine, that's you and me.
going to.
And not EFS, E-I-F-S. Okay,
Good, all right.
okay. So, but it is 100% thin brick.
Well, Mr.
Above
Smith,
the first-
above
above
the
the
first floor, yes.
I understand. Okay. Okay, 100%.
Hey, Marty, window details, cornice, and associated details like window panels will be precast issues, not brick.
With them, okay. Thin precast. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I believe, as usual, I mark these up quite a bit. I believe that answers most of my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Tim, did you have some questions?
One question, will there be a sign? Is it going to be something on the building? Is it going to be something on the?
Right at the front entrance off Coolidge, as it addresses the city, there'll be a monument sign, and there's a directional sign at the entrance between the
Right.
church and the
And
building.
do we know the size of that sign?
Nope,
Okay.
per ordinance.
You're not looking for something out of the ordinary in regards to size, or?
No spotlights and
I think you were-
sparklers,
I
no.
think you were
No
part of this
LEDs.
body when we ran into an issue with a PUD and a sign years ago. Okay. Again, I have concerns about the size of the building. I'll just say that. Again, trash collection, there'll be like a trash room on each floor, is that the plan? How's that, or the residents have to take it all the way down to the dumpster?
We have 2 rooms on each floor to be determined by management how they're going to use them.
Okay. Those are the utility rooms that I see? Okay, all right. That's it for now.
Anyone else? Mr. Tangari?
I just wanted to talk about something that I liked about the plan, which is the Coolidge frontage, including the active uses on the ground floor instead of parking. I'm pretty much of the opinion that, we have 2 miles of linear commercial development running through the middle of the city in 2 different directions, and that's kind of the way the whole region is developed, with lots of linear commercial, and I think we're extremely overbuilt with commercial in the region, and I have really no issue with the idea of an interruption in the constant commercial development on this block, but I also understand what active uses do to a streetscape and how they make people feel more welcome on a sidewalk. And I think that this kind of splits the difference pretty well by including the more active uses in the building on the ground floor as though they were storefronts, but they're not storefronts, and we don't need to worry about keeping them full. And it does provide that kind of break where you have a shopping center to the north, and it's relief from the constant row of commercial that we're so used to in this region. So I just wanted to point out that I think that that's a positive element of the way this plan has evolved.
All right, I guess I will make a few comments.
Mr. Chair, may I precede you or succeed you, I guess? I'll succeed you.
You want to succeed me, or do you want to go first?
Doesn't matter. It's your...
Why don't you go first?
Okay. I have actually prepared almost 3 pages of comments, and I'm not going to read them verbatim, but I think I should put my cards on the table before we take a vote. Okay.
I've still got comments, so.
You will have comments, I'm sure. We have 7 standards to meet under Code Section 537. Basically, I think we've met 6 of them. I think that there is a recognizable material benefit. I determined that by looking at the provision of 533, which requires us to find at least 3 out of 7 benefits applied to the PUD project. I do think that there are 3 benefits that apply, and I'm not including the shared parking. The benefits I think apply are high-quality architectural design, extensive landscaping beyond conventional zoning, and provision of public spaces. I do think that these benefits are theoretically possible to achieve under conventional zoning. However, for a variety of reasons, I don't believe it is likely that they could be achieved. And I believe a PUD is an appropriate way to approach redeveloping this site. We beat the subject of traffic to death. I'm going to go directly to item 7, standard 7, proposed development to be consistent with goals and policies of the master plan. And here I will read a little bit verbatim of what I wrote. The master plan 2007 update contemplates continued institutional use of the La Salette property, i.e. use as a church and school. Areas are designated for general commercial use along Coolidge to the north and south. and for multifamily parcels just off Coolidge to the north on Oxford, east, also in Oxford on the east side of Coolidge, and a half a block south straddling Columbia of the La Salette parcel. Demographic and social developments since 2007 have rendered continued use of the entire parcel owned by the Archdiocese impracticable for church and school purposes. The master plan notes the possibility that changing conditions may require flexibility in seeking to fulfill overall goals and objectives of the plan. The approach reflected in the master plan is to use multifamily and institutional zoning to buffer the commercial and retail areas along Coolidge from the single-family residential neighborhoods which start from a half a block to a block off Coolidge. The plan also contemplates the development of additional multifamily housing in proximity to commercial districts and to transit. The location of the proposed development is consistent with both of these purposes. I think a sizable apartment building can serve to buffer the neighborhoods from the traffic and commercial activity on Coolidge and support the growth of retail and service establishments in this part of the community. However, I believe that the apartment building as proposed is not consistent with the character of the adjacent business district along Coolidge. The master plan cautions that new multiple family residential development should possess innovative design elements that are consistent with the suburban character of the city, such as loft apartments or stacked condominiums. Design of multiple family buildings should complement the adjacent single-family residential neighborhoods. That's a master plan update at page 44. It's also useful to note that the recent proposed Berkley DDA design guidelines recommend that new development in this area consists of 2 stories at the street edge with occasional 3 and 4 stories that are set back from the street and adjacent neighborhoods. The proposed apartment building would exceed those recommendations. I went out to the neighborhood this morning. All of the commercial buildings along that strip are 1 story, maybe an occasional 2-story. This structure would be over 60 feet tall at its highest level. It's 4 times as tall as the other buildings along east and west sides of the street, and 20 feet taller than the maximum height of buildings permitted in the Coolidge district, 15 feet if the utility penthouse is not counted. So the building would tower over the proposed public plaza, and the existing church building to the south. North wing of the building exceeds 200 feet in length and set only 5 feet from the Oxford sidewalk, exacerbating the impact of the structure on pedestrians. The building as proposed would introduce an element to the Oxford streetscape which is not harmonious with the existing residential and non-residential structures in the immediate vicinity. I just think that putting a building of that height and mass in that neighborhood is contrary to sound urban design principles. Now, reducing the height of the building would address many of these concerns. In addition, the reduction of the apartment units would reduce parking requirements, freeing up additional space for landscaping and public use. Now, I commend the developer for making many changes in the plan as we've gone forward. Many of them were changes that I supported, some I recommended. I commend that. I think that what we have now is an improvement, and I welcome these changes. However, I have concluded the proposed development would, while it would confer some recognizable benefits to the Berkley, it does not conform to the goals and objectives of the master plan as currently designed. It's overscale in relation to the context of the neighborhood. And that's where I'm coming from on this, you know. This is really a more detailed version of remarks I've made before, so I don't think I'm surprising anybody with it. But size and scale of the building is my bugaboo.
You're stealing some of my thunder.
Sorry. I'm sorry if I did that.
That's okay. That's all right. So I have less to say. As most of you know, that I have spent and gone to the map for this project from the very beginning. And I saw parts of it before a lot of people saw it in very, very early stages. And what I saw in the early stages was probably much more doable than what I'm seeing now. I do not like the height of the building. I do not like the close proximity of the building that is to Oxford Road. That just burns my tail end off. And as Mr. Richardson had just said, the height of this building, the height of the whole thing, looking at the amount of land you have and the property you have, I think you're trying to take a 100-pound sack of potatoes and trying to cram it into a 50-pound bag. I think you do not have the amount of site that you really need for this building as you've proposed it at this stage of the game. I have issues with setbacks on the building and roof lines and what have you, because there are going to be issues for maintenance down the road. And at this point, I really can't, I understand. I like the concept of what it wants to be and what it wants to do. I think it's important to Berkeley to have that. But I think this building, for this to go forward, it needs to be reduced in scale, and it's got to be down to 100, maybe 85. I heard 85 thrown out by some of the residents here today, to get the building down to scale, to fit the site properly. And at this point, I can no longer support this project. And that's my only remaining comments. Now, what is the desire of the Planning Commission? We have to make a recommendation to council.
Mr. Chairman, to keep it simple, where yes is yes and no is no.
Yes, that's right.
I don't like the yes is no's and no's is yes. I'd like to recommend that we approve this or recommend this positively to City Council. There's a lot of things. I wrote down some. I'd like to add to that comment, and I would ask the help of the fellow planning commissioners. I tried writing them down as we went. That the engineering comments be worked out. I don't think there's anything there that like I said, that precludes us from pushing this along in a planning sense. The 6th floor, that irritates me. I think I expressed that. Every time I see this building, not every time, as I see this building, here it is again, it got bigger. And that, I was surprised after what we talked about a few months ago. So, 6th floor, the lofts will be reduced, if they are in fact mezzanines, to 1/3 max of the lower room. And frankly, you're gonna have an 8-foot wide room, and I don't know how furnishable that is. Add the exterior light fixture sheet. And yeah, I noticed some of the unit plan charts were inconsistent. Fix those. I think you have the right number on your floor plans. They add up. The 1 2-bedroom loft is really a 3-bedroom, but I don't think in the scheme of things of this building of this size, that's a big deal. Some minor things we talked about. I think someone wanted to see the connection to Oxford to the parking, covered parking. West property line, add a low wall to hide headlights, soften with landscaping. Detail the masonry wall along the southern parking areas, and lose that little tail or knob at the southwest corner entry. Is there anything else I left out?
Let me ask a question that maybe you may need to make a note to. The Parducci sculptures in the building,
Yeah.
are they being saved, or what's going on with those? And where are they going to be reutilized in the new prop?
The church's property, they will be maintained.
They'll be maintained, they're going to be reused.
Yes.
I think that should be put in your notes.
Agree. Yep.
To
Anybody
be
else?
salvaged, I mean,
Be
look,
salvaged and reused
Yeah.
in some fashion or other.
no, not necessarily on this building, but
No.
But
It
as
could be
if
put in-
Archdiocese,
They
don't-
might be able to be
don't destroy
included
it.
in the landscaping or something.
yeah, don't
Yeah.
run the digger through them. Okay.
Right.
Is there anything else that I left off of any of the other planning commissioners?
Anybody else got anything you want to add to his motion?
Sign. We want to see, see the plans of the sign.
Signs is separate permit, but you're correct.
Yep. It's a PUD. We need to have it in there.
Shrubbery, excuse me. Along here? Yeah, low wall softened by shrubbery.
And there.
You know, I like the comment is the shrubbery along Oxford parking lot. I don't mind it. If someone else has a problem with it, I think it's wonderful. They've been looking through a chain link fence all these years. It's a vast improvement over what they've been looking at. And, you know, I think it's gonna have screening is 100%. I don't know. If somebody else feels otherwise,
I like that it's set back 25 feet.
we
from
have the
sidewalk,
25
too.
feet, but there was a comment on Mr. Carlisle's report to change the
There's an
landscaping.
issue
along-
about the headlights on,
Mhm.
yeah.
That was in the rear. That wasn't.
That was in the rear? Okay,
That
then never.
wasn't- But
Yeah.
the question, the point was, I wasn't suggesting along Oxford that it all be, just that the mix to be more heavily weighted towards evergreens, so you
Yeah.
got more of a screening effect.
Yeah,
Okay.
boxwoods or something of that nature.
Well, they have evergreen trees shown along there.
Yeah, I
yes,
know they
and
do.
some deciduous shrubs, so, yes.
Is that the consensus of the?
I
planning
think that's
commission?
a,
I support that.
Mr. McLean, do you have that?
I think so. Just let me reiterate, confirm, that was a motion to approve with conditions, correct?
Yes, sir. Motion to recommend
Recommend
approval
with
with conditions.
recommend to council.
If I may, excuse me, should we enumerate the items that we think that the PUD meets the following standards?
By all means. And also, I will admit, I got totally bored with the parking issue. There's other issues that really piqued my interest. If you folks believe we should add something about that all being resolved, it needs to be resolved. I don't know the wording.
Has to.
So that's another thing that should be added to this, and help me out with that. But go ahead, sorry.
I would just add to your recommend approval, because the plan provides for the following site design elements that could not be attained through conventional zoning. The ones I have written down are the preservation of open space or public plazas, shared vehicular access between properties. I would also mention the one about extensive landscaping. I mean, we don't have a lot in our ordinance that talks about landscaping. So this is above ordinance requirements. High-quality architectural design, I think, is debatable. So I might just stick with the open space, the shared vehicular access, and the extensive landscaping. And then to build on the parking comment that you made, Marty, maybe something along the lines of a planning commission finding that adequate parking exists for the site, but that the applicant should continue to explore shared parking with the city's attorney and with the church property.
Mr. McLean, do you have all that?
Yes, sir.
I believe that's a little, it should be a little stronger on that. I think that our recommendation, if we make it, should be, another contingency should be approval of the reciprocal easement and shared parking agreement. And entry into an approved reciprocal easement and shared parking agreement. I think we should just encourage them to pursue it. I think we should insist that they do it.
Could we add something about, with the city attorney's approval, or some sort of reference to the fact that he still has to finally weigh in?
Well, of course, an acceptable shared parking agreement. And you can massage that a little bit to reflect that it needs to be approved by the attorney, I'm sure. But as far as I don't know if we have a consensus on which design elements we all agree are met or not. So I'm a little hesitant to go there too. Maybe there are three we can all agree on. I don't know, but we made that determination some time ago anyway. So I'm not sure we should spend a long time trying to see if we have a consensus on which three. I mean, my list was a little bit different, and I didn't include shared parking because it hasn't been approved yet.
So would it be better to change that to, with a finding that the plan meets at least 3 of the site design elements that could not be attained through a project under conventional zoning? Would that be a little
Yeah,
bit-
well, I think we have to find that all 7.
No, we don't.
No, just 3.
No, three under 533, but 7 under 537, which
includes having
Which
to find
includes.
the recognizable material benefit.
so if we're going to enumerate what we found, I guess it should be those 7 elements under 537. That would be my recommendation.
I agree.
Okay.
I would agree with you there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
with the absence of Ms. Chair, we all realize that we still need 5 votes to pass this.
Yes, you do.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. 5 positive votes to pass this.
Question on that. So if it's 5 votes of no, is then the recommendation of council to deny?
I think we would want to see an inverse motion. If this motion fails, we would need another motion to
Yes, we'll
send
have
it
to do a new
to
motion.
recommend denial. Yeah.
That's
This-
what I was getting at.
If this thing ties, we're going to have another motion.
Just to add, Mr. Chair, a failed motion to approve is not necessarily a motion to deny. So a separate motion to deny would have to be made if
Yep.
the motion to approve
Exactly.
fails.
Yes, if we tie out, it's
Yes.
going to be, yep.
Regarding your condition about the 6th floor, I can leave this to discussion of the motion after we receive a second, or we can talk about it now, whichever the chair prefers.
Let's talk about it now,
Okay.
so we can get it behind us.
Regarding the 6th floor, we're just going to call it the 6th floor. We're cutting the 6th floor. Would it be more humane to kill it outright?
That takes away a lot of apartments, viable apartments. You turn that in, they all become studio apartments.
Gotcha.
That's not necessarily true.
I mean,
Most of them become.
I'm just thinking,
Probably not.
issues with scale are
Corners
a
are the ones
concern.
that have the
Do we just take that 6th floor away?
All the way around.
You want to recommend?
Pardon me?
to
I'm
take-
sorry.
He's saying, should we just take that 6th floor away and say, because what, it's going to leave them 8 foot or something of that nature, something?
I mean, I just don't know that it would
Be
leave a
one of the
viable
ways that they
space.
choose to resolve that issue, right?
The
They just have to
resolution
resolve.
is, if they're gonna call it a mezzanine, it has to comply with what the code says a mezzanine is.
Sure.
Which is 1/3 the floor area of the room space below. Now, if there's a living room and a separate bedroom, a living room kitchen, there's a separate bedroom, that bedroom doesn't count.
Sure.
It's 1/3 of that living room and kitchen.
Right.
It's in the big space. We do a lot of markets, we do a lot of factories, we do a lot of, has to be within the space.
Right.
So that's, that may render them unfurnishable. I don't know. That's up to them.
Sure.
But that's why I made that as part of the motion, if someone else has a better idea.
My better idea would be to eliminate one of the other floors and leave the mezzanine or the 6th floor.
Well, sure.
But that's,
I don't like the 6th floor either, but in reality, they have mechanical mezzanine up there,
Yes.
X high.
Yes.
This is the same height.
Yep.
It's a little more spread out, but is in the middle of the building.
Right.
And I guess whenever we talked about this last time, March, with Mr. Carlisle talking about getting rid of the podium, I suggested that they do look at some loft units. However, I was looking at a 4-story building with a partial 5th floor. And when I saw this as a 5-story building with a partial 6th floor, that's not what I expected to see. So,
But it is what it is.
if they can, well, the windows face in, so, you know, it doesn't have a whole impact. If you walk along Oxford, the building's 5 feet from you, you're not gonna see that extra mezzanine. If you're driving down Coolidge, you're not gonna see that. So,
You'll see it more from...
but as it is now, it is a 6th floor. And by code, you can't build it, and I don't know how you're gonna stack 5 floors of lumber up either, but that's a construction thing. So I'm open to an alternative. I think if they can resolve it, the motion stands.
Okay, if they were to attempt to resolve it by moving the walls forward and taking up more of the roof, would that be acceptable? Or are we
All
looking
has
at
to do with the
keeping the
what-
same exterior shell and
Well,
working
the
with?
shell is a shell. The idea of calling it a mezzanine is a floor plan square footage
Right,
item.
but we're not giving them license to change the shell in order to make it
Like make a whole
work.
6th floor.
Oh, absolutely, no 6th floor. We do not want to see a 6th floor. And that's the problem I have with this, because as it stands, they are a 6th floor by code, not by ordinance. But it can't be built by code due to the pedestal building that we call these types of buildings. So therefore, we can't approve it. That's my opinion. But if they were to rework these so they became, the lofts became mezzanines, maybe that's the way it goes. But it is, right now, it stands as a 6-story building.
And that's what we're voting on.
We're voting on a 6-story building.
What's presented.
Voting on a 6th-floor building. So, have we got everything?
Mr.
Is there a
Chairman?
second to the motion?
I'll second.
You'll second it? All right. Then I guess we're ready. Do you want it all read back to you? Or do you want to go ahead and vote on it?
I think for the benefit of anyone who hasn't been taking notes in the room, we should probably have it read back.
Read it back.
A motion by Commissioner Smith to recommend approval of PUD-01-17 to City Council, supported by Commissioner Shadle, with conditions that a revised engineering plan be submitted, exterior light fixture sheet be provided.
Oh, let me butt in. Not a revised engineering plan to comply with the engineering items. Sorry.
I stand corrected.
Okay.
Compliance with engineering standards, provision of an exterior light fixture sheet, detailed masonry wall along the west property line, was that correct, Mr. Smith?
The south portion.
South.
Yeah, which would be the north and the west of the south parking lot. I'm glad you're reading this.
Trying to take notes furiously. With also the condition that the Parducci statues be reused and not scrapped. Also submit plans for the proposed monument and building signs as well. Did I get everything?
There was fix the analysis sheet.
I'm sorry?
Fix the analysis, the part, the AS1.
And the low wall, the low masonry wall along the
West
west.
side of the north
Yes,
parking.
yes.
To be softened with landscaping. And we talked about the connection to Oxford into the covered parking.
No, that wasn't what the comment was. It was to connect the walkways.
A walkway.
Then I wrote that down wrong. I apologize. Detail masonry wall, we talked about that. Lose the little swirl knob flare at the southwest corner facing west. Lose that west flare parking.
Yeah, onto Harvard.
And one of the other commissioners talked about the shared parking agreement. But I don't know what the final language of that was.
Resolve it to the lawyers or to
Upon
the
a-
city attorney's satisfaction.
Yeah, upon,
Add, and you mentioned add light fixture sheet, exterior light fixture sheet. And we talked about the 6th floor to be reduced to 1/3 of the lower room.
Got it.
Do we have to mention in here the contract between the city and the developer? Completion of that acceptable to both parties?
I believe that would be worked out by the city council.
Okay, is that going to be worked out by the council?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
the agreement would be
'Cause-
negotiated by the manager and city council.
All right. Okay, we have a second to the motion. Everybody's heard it. Any other changes, corrections? All right, let's take a vote on this.
Richardson,
no.
Shadle,
No.
Smith,
No.
Tangari,
No.
Kaplonsky,
Yes.
Kempner,
No.
Murad,
No.
and Barnett.
No.
6-1, motion does not pass.
So now, do we have something to send the council or no?
Well, since the motion to approve did not pass, we would need a second motion, either to approve with revised conditions or a motion to deny.
All right.
However, if there is a motion to deny, we would need the specific reasoning for denial.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Richardson.
I move that we recommend denial of item number 0117 for the reason that the proposal fails to fulfill all of the standards required by the PUD ordinance 138-537.
Is there a second to that motion?
I would, if I may add, I think the building is just too dang big. And maybe not dang is the proper word, but it's just, the scale and height is just too large.
It may make sense to add to that motion then, because the scale of the building is not consistent with the surrounding neighborhood.
Well, did everyone who voted no share that conclusion?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, then I feel comfortable adding language. I believe that would be a failure to meet the requirement of subsection 7 of 737, failure to comply with the requirements of the master plan.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Discussion on the motion, or can we go for it?
I think discussion, at least I would like to.
Okay, go ahead.
I honestly think I could have approved this tonight if it had one less floor.
I agree. I
agree too.
Yeah.
That was my,
So, I don't know
If I might, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
With the chair's permission?
Go ahead.
If in fact, as part of this design, we remove the lofts, which frankly were offered as part of an alternative to some of the other design elements on the project, I think we could still make the project work. We designed the fifth floor units differently and would be 5 stories tall, no loft units.
Would it still have the mechanical mezzanine?
The mechanical penthouse would still be there, in part because, as Mr. Smith asked about the mechanical system type, we need a place for chillers and other equipment in that location.
Well, I think the issue we have is that council wants to see this, and we've been beating this thing to death for so many months and weeks and years. It's been over a year now, and I think maybe what we best need to do is send something to council and let council make the final decision. And we have a motion on the
We do
table
have
right now.
a further discussion, yeah. Council's free to do whatever they want with it.
Exactly.
And I think they're even free to send it back to us.
They very well could, but, well, they want to get something, so I think
administratively, we should just proceed and let the next step unfold.
let it go, yeah.
Mr.
Tim.
To the petitioner's comment about the mezzanine, I don't have a problem with the mezzanine. I have a problem with one floor. If you removed one floor, you'd only be 3 stories on Coolidge. It'd be lower. The whole mass of the building would be lower. Your parking issues would go away completely. I know there's economy for you guys as to what it's costing you and what you're going to be able to take in as rent, but that's where I'm at least. I don't know if everybody else feels the same, but that's where I'm at.
I agree, Mr. Quinn. Removing the mezzanine alone doesn't reduce the mass of the
Right.
building, the density of the building, in my mind. Having a 5-story with a mezzanine, I'd rather see a 4-story with a mezzanine.
It actually is 4 stories facing Oxford and the corners.
Understood, and I appreciate that you've done that. But just to be clear, removing the mezzanine alone
Point of order, Mr.
would
Chairman.
not satisfy my.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
What?
Discussion with, you've got a motion on the floor, it's been seconded. Further discussion with the applicants is out of order.
We're going to take a vote on it as it stands. Thank you.
Ready?
Yeah, go for it.
Shadle.
Can we what's the motion? Let's make sure we're all on the same page.
We had the motion by Commissioner Richardson and supported by Commissioner Kempner to deny the PUD application for reasons that the proposal fails to meet required PUD standards under section 138-537, specifically subsection 7, failure to comply with the goals of the master plan relative to size and scale of the proposed building.
Thank you.
Good. And not to be hyper-technical, but it's what we're recommending.
This is recommendation to council. Council then takes it and runs with it, however they want to. Let's go, call the roll.
Shadle.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Tangari.
Yes.
Kapelansky.
No.
Kempner.
Yes.
Murad.
No.
And Barnett.
Yes.
5-2.
Did you call my name?
I'm sorry, Richardson.
Yes.
So it goes to council now as denial because of what are the conditions, the master plan conditions. And it'll be up to council to decide how they want to proceed from here.
Yes, sir.
That's what we needed to do tonight, and we've done it. All right, with that, I thank everyone. I thank all of the residents for their input tonight. And at this point in time, we'll run around the room here with liaison reports. It's getting late. If you so desire, if you want to postpone those, we can do so.
Let's go.
All right. Could I have a quiet, please? We're still conducting a the meeting here. Okay, environmental?
The Environmental Committee did operate a bike corral at the Art Bash. It rained most of the day. Very few people biked to the Art Bash. However, we manned our tent and we interacted with many people who were interested in environmental issues in Berkeley. And I think we provided them with information, what they could do as homeowners, and shared some of our vision for sustainable development and practices in the community. So I consider it a success under the soggy circumstances.
Chamber, I was not able to attend the meeting, but I did attend the Art Bash and volunteered for a good part of the afternoon. Yeah, it was wet, but there was still a lot of people out there. Which I was kind of surprised by, and one of the tasks I always take on when I volunteer is passing out water to the artists and talking to them, and a lot of them were very surprised or happy with the event because they made money. You know, that considering the conditions, that they felt the turnout was still pretty good. So, because it was never a hard rain. No, it was just constant until about maybe 4 in the afternoon. And they're preparing for the Street Art Festival, which is July 14th, I think it is.
Right, somewhere.
14th or 15th. That's it.
Parks and Rec?
They don't meet in the summer, so, but I did attend the June 18th City Council meeting, and everybody probably knows by now that they took the City Hall renovation off of the agenda for the November election. So the road millage will be on there, the road millage, and then the community center bond. They decided that'd be too much at this time, so they took that off. The sewer study conversation they will be having at their July meeting for all those folks interested in sewers. And the thing everybody showed up for was discussing the pilot program regarding backyard chickens. One person, they had 5 permits available, one person or one family partook of it, no complaints, everything is successful. Apparently no interest or disinterest from anybody else, so they removed the sunset provision, and those folks will be able to keep their chickens.
Okay. Did I miss anything or anybody? We don't have a DDA rep, I don't believe.
Joe.
Well, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
really
Joe
have much
is.
to report,
But
to be
Joe
honest.
poor Joe has been
I've
stacked up
been-
with work till,
Yeah, I haven't had any time to attend anything, so I don't have any particular update.
okay.
Design guidelines draft turned out really nice, I thought. But I don't really have any
Okay.
concrete update, to be honest.
All right, then with that, I'll run around the room. Lisa, any comments tonight?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Tangeri?
2 comments. The first one is about the case we just voted on. I really didn't want to vote against it because I really think that we do need multifamily development in the city, and I really do think that I want to see that happen there. I've had problems with every iteration of the plan that was presented to us, and it was just a very frustrating process the whole way through. I just felt like it never quite came together in a way that was right for that site, and that's very unfortunate. And you know, if they were to apply again and I were to be looking at it and they had a substantially different plan, I would have to consider it in you know, the light of whatever new plan they had. It kind of killed me to vote to recommend denial, because they were offering something that we need. They were just not offering it in a way that I felt was appropriate for the site. So with that said, I actually have declined to seek reappointment to the Planning Commission. It's not something that I wanted to do, but it's something that I had to do. I would not have been able to attend the last 4 meetings of the year. As it is, I haven't made it to a single study session in the last year because of work conflicts. And my general opinion about serving on a planning commission or any board is that if my name is here, my butt should be here. And if it's not going to be here, then my name shouldn't be there. I just have to, I can't seek reappointment at this point, and it kills me to do that, and I hate it, but that's the way it is at the moment. My schedule just can't accommodate it at this point, so I will miss these meetings, believe it or not. And I hope that one day I'll be able to serve on the Planning Commission again, and I hope it won't be that long in the future. But I thank all of you for all the work that you do on this board, and I'm glad that I was able to be a part of it for the last 4-ish years or something like that. 4 or 5? I can't even remember at this point. But anyway, with sadness, this will be my last meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate your service to this Planning Commission. You've really grown into this job, let me tell you. Ms. Shadle?
Yeah, I too, I think your expertise will be missed. I appreciate where you're coming from, however, so I wish you only the best, and I hope that we do see you back up here at some point in the future. Given the process that we have gone through here with this particular opportunity, I think in our city, I do believe that there's a win in here. I believe that many of the folks that we've heard from over this series of meetings believe there's a win in here. It just wasn't what we saw tonight. So that's all I have.
Mr. Muir?
I kind of echo Joe's comments about tonight. You know, that's part of why I voted against the denial, because I think there was still an opportunity for them to make one change. And to me, it's a simple change, because you lose 1 floor, you're down to 94 units. They meet the parking requirements at 2 per unit, where they sit right now. And it takes the scale of the building down, but maybe they've got to go back and review the economics of it and see if they can make it work that way. You know, I did also have a little concerns about the setback at Coolidge, or not at Coolidge, but at Oxford. So, and Joe, we're going to miss you. So whoever's coming in has big shoes to fill. So.
I can understand the vote tonight and why it went the way that it did. I can understand the concerns about the massing and the scale of the building. I think it would have been a real easy decision had 1 story been gone. But I kind of want to take out of this, too, that no matter if we're voting yes or no, it should never take 2 years or 1.5 years to get to that point.
No, shouldn't have.
We should be able to give an applicant an easy, and residents, an easy yes or no, up or down on 1 or 2 meetings. So I hope as our involvement with RRC moves forward and things like that, that we can kind of make that a little bit smoother for residents and us and applicants, so that we're not leaving people hanging, because it's really not fair to anyone. And then just thanks to Joe. We will miss you. Get all your zoning changes that you've been noting to us before you go.
Yeah, I'll keep the door open there.
Share it with Tim.
Yeah. And that's all.
Mr. Richards?
Well, I want to thank you for your service, Joe, and you've been a very great educator to me during your tenure here, and I'm going to miss that. Your comments on design issues I find very astute, and you have a lot of insight. I think we're going to miss that, so I'm sorry to see you leaving, but I understand your decision. I, too, wanted to vote. I wanted to vote yes, emotionally. This is a good site for multifamily development. Having a multifamily development there is not inconsistent with our master plan. It's the specifics of this particular plan that I kept stumbling over. And to the point about it taking 2 years, I'm sitting here mentally blaming the applicant for most of those delays. But to be fair-minded about it, some of the responsibility does fall on us. I know for my own part, my style with the developers, the applicant, is to ask them, you know, you sure you couldn't remove that front drive? That makes it look like a hospital. You sure you couldn't reduce the height? You sure you couldn't set it back? And they would always say, no, no, no. And I'm just wondering now if maybe I should have said, reduce it, and you got me. Maybe that's what they needed to hear. Just parenthetically, Mr. Morelli once cautioned me, don't ever get into the finances of a development in your consideration. That was great advice, and that's one of the reasons I don't tell, I ask, because it's up to them to figure out their finances. That's not our business. That's not on our agenda. So I think I'm going to have to figure out for myself a better style without going into areas that we don't get into. I think we all need to
But I think
think about that.
us as a body, try to give the applicant every chance, whether it's this developer or anybody else. We always give them a chance. A lot of times we'll say, okay, we're going to table it, come back,
Yeah,
fix our
and
comments, and usually we pass them.
they bear a degree of responsibility for these delays. Let's be real about that. You know, so it isn't all on us, but we can always think about ways that we can improve too.
Mr. Smith.
Regarding tonight's issue, we need modern apartments in this community. And I firmly believe that's a place, one of the 1 or 2 places to put them. I mean, there's no doubt that's a proper place for them. I wanted to vote yes, and I probably came in here tonight planning to vote yes. But they're just, it's just too big, and it was just not the right building. And I guess that's it. I really wanted to vote yes, and I hope someone comes back with something else, another alternative for that site, because it is the right place to put them. And Berkley would be much better off if we had it. Someone made a comment about leaving Berkley. I know 2 seniors already. One's an 80-year-old something, 80-something-year-old resident of Berkley, and she moved because there's no place that she can go. And you all know who I'm talking about. That's a shame, and we should have something here, and it's bad that we don't. So anyway, that's being said, and also, Joe, thank you. 4 or 5 years, whatever it was, and hope you come back.
Yeah, I do too.
Thank you.
Tim, anything tonight?
I will defer my comments until you've made yours, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. All right. I agree. I agree with your comments. This was a hard decision for me to make tonight.
Me too.
Because I've gone to the map for this project trying, because we need what they were proposing.
Yep.
And we need it now. And it was very hard, but I finally, in the last several weeks, came to the conclusion what they were proposing was just too large for the site and didn't fit Berkley as it's designed. Now, moving to my last comments for the evening. This is my last meeting with the Berkeley City Planning Commission. I will surrender the gavel and everything else from the city to the city. And I have served the city here for 24 years, and it's been a great pleasure to be able to. I am grateful to Mayor Durst, to Mayor Maybelle Frazier, to Mayor Mooney, Mayor Steffen, and Mayor O'Dwyer for supporting me in this task. I also need to thank Betsy Reich, who was our first city planner when I came on board, and Miss Amy Vanson, who succeeded her in this job. But I also have to thank one other person who's no longer with us, and that was my mentor in planning. And that was Mr. Charles Blessing, who was the city planner for the city of Detroit for a number of years. He was my mentor, and a lot of decisions that I made in architecture and what I make, he's sort of standing by my side because I know he's looking over and saying, "Don't do that, David. That ain't right." But I need to thank him for that. And so I hope all will go well with the city, and I know all of you will continue on. And Mr. Tangary, I wish you a lot of luck in your life as a planner and carrying on. And I also need to thank the American Planning Association, the Michigan chapter, for last year honoring me as the Planning Commissioner of the Year. And with that, Mr. Tim?
First, I'd like to just ask that the commissioners keep Chair Buckler in your thoughts and prayers as she's undergoing a family emergency. Like to thank Commissioner Tangari for his service to the Planning Commission. It isn't very often that I get to work with a commission that has such expertise on it, and you hate to lose somebody like Joe, who's been a very valuable contributor to the Planning Commission, and I hope you come back someday.
Yeah, I do too.
Commissioner Barnett, you've chaired this commission for a number of years. You've served on it for 24. Your contributions to this commission and this city have been invaluable. While I've only been with the city of Berkeley for 6 months, it has been an absolute pleasure to have worked with you. Your presence will be missed. There's institutional knowledge that cannot be replaced. So I thank you for your contributions and your service. And I hope it goes without saying that for yourself and Commissioner Tangari, my door is always open if you ever want to discuss anything, ever need anything, or you just want to say hi.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.